argument of, well, if that's the market, that's what the market pays, then to some extent, you have to accept that's the price of a top quality player in the market. But also on the other side, if you've got a fellow on a 3-year contract who signed it in sound body and mind, then you have that argument on the other side of it. I don't know whether this is a legitimate transactional opportunity for Alexander Usyk to leave to one of the bigger football clubs.
You have to be careful not to confuse Alexander Usyk and Alexander Isak.
I did it the other day, yeah.
Everyone does.
I've done it about 3 times this week. I don't know whether it's a legitimate situation where there's going to be a transaction executed that enables him to leave to a bigger club, or this is a stalking horse to bring Newcastle to the table to say, listen, I'm warning you, this boy can go and he will go unless you give him what he wants.
Listen, I'd love to hear from Newcastle fans about, whether they think they've been hobbled by financial restrictions that apply to all clubs. Let's not kid ourselves.
But they must do.
And whether the idea that Newcastle is not an elite football club, and look, I don't go along the idea necessarily that they're not an elite football club, but what I will say, Simon, and this may be London-centric, is that, I've met professional footballers who didn't want to go and play in the northeast of England. They'll always make some excuse up like, oh, my wife likes London.
But it depends what the terms of reference are for an elite football club. If you're looking at elite football clubs by the roll call of honours, then there is no argument in modern football that Newcastle do not fill that category. That's not suggesting they can't. If you're looking at elite football clubs for the passion and commitment of their fan base, then they're an elite football club.
Yeah. Listen, Newcastle fans, 03717 223344, 03717 223344. We have got a packed agenda. We'll try and squeeze in some of your calls. What should they do about Alexander Isak? Newcastle presumably they can afford to pay him. Presumably they want to keep him. But what if he wants to go? What's the story and why? What is preventing Newcastle, other than in your minds? Of course, they're the biggest club in England. Why wouldn't you say that about your own club? 03717 223344. What is holding back Newcastle? Why would Alexander Isak even want to leave to go to Liverpool? 03717 223344. Of course, today we'll keep you up to date from 11 o'clock with everything that's happening in the Test match as well.
The interesting one for Newcastle fans also is United pulling Mbamo from Brentford to United rather than the other opportunities were there. Those are the sort of things that would worry me if I was a Newcastle fan. Of course, they've got Anthony Elanga, and he's elected to go there, and that's a good deal. And he's a good player,
good footballer,
and he will add to Newcastle. I'm with Shearer on the Isak argument. If people want to buy him, first of all, Newcastle name the price and the terms of the conditions around the financing of that particular deal, and sell him. Because no one's bigger than one football club. Eddie Howe won't want somebody in the dressing room that's not 100% committed. And so with Shearer's analysis, which is if they get 150 million quid, sell him, I don't disagree with that. Because Newcastle's a bigger football club than Isak, and they will have an opportunity to redeploy that money. And it may well be that builds a better squad than just one individual, albeit it's an individual of unique talent, I think.
Sure. That, Simon, is sending a chill through my old bones. It reminds me of the Gareth Bale sale where, yes, world record fee, and Spurs bought 7 players to replace him. But if all 7 were allowed to play with 10 others, they wouldn't have replaced him.
But that's going from one extreme to the other. That's basically saying that bad buying is something that people should avoid, and they should avoid it anyway.
Yeah, of course. You have to be aware of it. That's the point. Newcastle fans, let me give that number again, 03717 223344. Here's some fuel for the fire for you. Gabby Bonlahor joined Adi Oladipo on Drive yesterday and explained why Gabby, believes that Alexander Isak is well within his rights to move on from Newcastle.
He would have been told when he was signed from Real Sociedad that these are the plans. We're going to get this player, this player, this player, this player. And he's looked around the change room. And look, Newcastle think I've got a good squad, but he's looked around the change room and thought, you're not delivering on your promises.
Yeah, and he's been around Newcastle now. What is it? Nearly 3 years. Yeah. He's got 3 years left on his contract. But he's probably thought to himself, you know what? Newcastle, big club in Newcastle. Newcastle aren't a big club worldwide. Just in Newcastle. That's facts. Newcastle fans can come on and argue that with me. They're a big club in Newcastle. Yeah. He's looking at it and thinking, I might want to go and win Ballon d'Ors.
Yeah.
I might want to win Champions Leagues. I don't just play in the Champions League. I want to win it. I want to win Premier Leagues. I'm not 21 or 25. Newcastle can't give me what I want.
Desperate moment for you, Simon. You agree with Gabby?
I was about to say this is one of those mythical things where they pass around the eye to see who can see. In this instance, it's passed around the brain. I don't think Isak was told when he left Sociedad, that there was a whole raft of players that they were going to be signing. I don't think that's true at all. I think he was given an opportunity.
Why would you make a hostage to fortune for yourselves? It's always going to backfire.
Yeah, and you're signing a player that at that particular point landed at Newcastle because there wasn't an interest from the bigger clubs. So let's have it right. With due respect to Newcastle and all the things that we talk about in their exalted fan base, they are still a club that was a work in progress when Alexander Isak was signing for them. And the vision might be becoming clearer now, and the ambition, but there was always going to be the restrictions that were going to be put upon Newcastle and the PIF fund that owns them around financial governance, which is why I've always laid the claim, as much as I like Eddie, and I've really done a U-turn on my views of him as a manager, that he won't lead them to the holy grail of winning the Premier League.
But that won't be his fault. The way that
it probably won't.
The way
be.
the finances are set up.
Yeah,
it does seem, in recent years, it's a separate argument. People like Aston Villa and Newcastle have made the leap into the Champions League and then been punished for it almost because their finances suddenly changed.
Certainly, I mean, one example of that is Nottingham Forest going up when they were consequenced because they only carried out the losses they were allowed in the Championship, which I think is absurd. You're disadvantaged when you go up to the Premier League as a result of being a Championship football club. And when you get there, you've got less opportunities than the established Premier League clubs because you can only carry so many losses. But I suppose you have to be patient. You have to build and build and build and build. And the Man City and Chelseas of the world are fortunate through timing.
And I'm going to say this now, and I'm not just saying it because it happens to be Spurs. You have to be patient. And let me tell you that when the moment does come, as it did in Bilbao, after 17 years of nothing and all that patience and all that, it was almost better for it, Simon. I found myself in Excelsis. I was having an out-of-body experience. I was so excited. Not just for myself.
Don't associate patience with the Spurs fan base, though.
No. And doing a Spurs podcast, I can tell you that is not their number one priority just now. And Daniel Levy must know that as well. Listen, we don't have to be very patient for the final of the Women's European Championships. England, the holders, take on Spain, the favourites. It could hardly be more delicious. We'll look forward to that next here on Jordan and Kelly on talkSPORT.
Kelly inside the box, and she pokes it home off the goalkeeper. And
Live for these moments as a little girl, so that little girl today enjoyed every moment of that.
now time for another summer of unforgettable moments.
This is a new moment, and before every tournament you experience a different thing.
And Jiman! 2-2!
That's what we feel when we put the shirt on. It's that we give everything, we run ourselves into the ground.
Holmberg, it's over! England are in the semi-final!
No, we don't make it easy, but we definitely put on a show for everyone watching.
Kelly, save! Kelly there again, it's in! England 2, Italy 1. This is just extraordinary. Tanner, oh, she scored! Bag of beats never near post! And Tanner finds a way!
I think England, I'd actually prefer to go up against Spain than I would Germany.
But it's the world champions Spain who are one game away from European glory. But England's Lionesses will have something to say about that.
For a start, let's be honest, what about those commentaries here on talkSPORT? Absolutely outstanding, really, really brilliant. And we are now just 2 days away from that final, 5 o'clock on Sunday. England against Spain. Remember, meanwhile, you're listening to White and Jordan on talkSPORT with Selco Builders Warehouse. It's where the trade go. To help us look forward, and we'll be doing a lot of this over the next 50-odd hours here on talkSPORT. We're joined by, of course, one of the voices of our football coverage, Courtney Sweetman-Kirk. Hello, Courtney.
Hello, good morning to you both.
It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I say see you now because I could only hear her in the past, but now I can see her on the screen in front of me. Courtney, before we get into the individual bits and pieces of the game, it struck me as I was thinking about the match last night that this is becoming the great rivalry in women's football, isn't it? England and Spain.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's the one that sort of I myself predicted before the tournament as that would be the final, along with many other people, I imagine, because as you say, the last few years the how Spain have built this side, obviously winning the World Cup, and the same with England, the fact that obviously they're Euros holders, got to the World Cup final, were beaten by Spain. So yeah, it's definitely a rivalry that's getting better and better, and obviously England from that perspective will be hoping that they win the battle this time.
For people like me who I don't need to sell the match, of course, but who are paid to sell the match, it's the holders against the favourites. Are Spain still favourites in your mind, given we're now down to a one-off match, Courtney?
I would still say so. I think throughout the tournament they've put in some wonderful performances. I mean, you could argue that they've had an easier route than us, but I think they've looked more comfortable throughout the tournament. Although a little thing I will say to that is I think a lot of people watching the Germany game, specifically the Lionesses fans, looked at that Spain-Germany game with a little bit of happiness. The fact that Spain didn't blow Germany away. They've shown that Spain, there's still some places to be exploited, especially in that back line. It's quite slow, and we've got pace in those areas. So I would still say that Spain are the favourites with the bookies. I mean, maybe you'll be able to tell me, but I think it's going to be a great game. Two nations that are in a very good place, going toe-to-toe, looking to obviously win the Euros, and England looking to retain it.
Courtney, in boxing terms, how do the two teams match up? How similar are they in styles, or how different are they in style and what they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think they're quite similar in styles. I think it's something that England have certainly improved on through Serena Wiegmann's reign in terms of being a possession-based team, and Spain are certainly that historically. Whether it's men's or women's, they all have that philosophy of being possession-based. So what I will say with that is very similar, but I think maybe England have got a little bit more adaptability. They have got that ability to go a bit longer, as I mentioned, to use our pace that we've got in areas and go a little bit longer at times. And I think we've got a little bit more of a physical presence. And, a lot has been said. There's sort of a phrase that's come out of this tournament for England in terms of that English way. So I think we've got a little bit more of those dark arts and that physical presence. But both teams are teams that want to possess the ball, like to control the game by having the ball.
What about the teams? I mean, you're not picking them. What do you feel? Many changes from the England semi-final team? Because Wiegmann's not been afraid to make changes when she's had to.
Yeah, I think she normally makes them from the bench, though. I think that's the thing. There's been very sort of little changes, like one or two. Don't think she's made two actually to an 11, but she's tweaked it around. But those actual changes to the 11, I'm not entirely sure she'll do that. I keep clambering to say Chloe Kelly should be starting. I said that for the semi-final, and I think the same for the final. She showed when she's come on, she's got such a great attitude to obviously come and impact the game. But I think she can do that from the start as well. I know a lot of people as well are speaking about Michelle Agerman, but personally now I still think she's the sort of ability and presence that has more of an impact from the bench, and especially because she's young, it's her first major tournament. How she would cope from being in from the start, I'm not too sure. Would it overawe her? I mean, she might take to it like a duck to water, like she has to everything else in this tournament, but I think Chloe Kelly's got that experience where if you put her in from the start, you exactly know what you're getting.
Why do you think that she doesn't, Courtney? I mean, these two girls, Chloe and Michelle, have come on and rescued England in 2 games, and at some point they're going to play against an opposition that are in control of a game and don't allow that control to be relinquished. So why do you think Sarina doesn't change the formation or change the personnel, not the formation, the personnel, given that these players are so effective when they come on?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Simon. I think there's 2 sides to it, because in one space people will go, well, you know, she's making the changes, she's making the substitutions, they're coming on and making an impact, so she's doing the right thing. But you can argue it the other way, and that's some of the position that I'm on at times, where I think, well, if you start a different team, then you might not have to get to a point where you're looking for a goal in the 96th minute to try and get through. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know whether it's loyalty, whether it's the philosophy that Sarina has. I think I spoke to her actually before at the Euros when she wasn't, sort of the last tournament, when she wasn't making many changes at the World Cup, and I said, is that your philosophy? And she said, no, that's not necessarily my philosophy in keeping it the same, but it's almost that's how I see it. But, you know, the more time goes on, the more it looks like a philosophy to me and a loyalty to certain players. So I've got to sit down with her a little bit later, actually, so maybe it's a question to ask.
If Sarina Wiegman wins this tournament, I suppose if she loses it as well, will she have done all she can with England, Courtney? And what will the future hold for a person who's been, well, since she got the job, virtually, you know, completely successful getting teams into finals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the FA were very strong on saying, and Mark Bullingham saying yesterday, that they want to keep her. She is, you know, she's fantastic in terms of what she's done for the women's game, how she's progressed the Lionesses. I think you know, if she wins it again, it almost gets more difficult for her, doesn't it? Because the expectation then raises again, and they're going into every tournament at the minute with the Lionesses thinking they have to, you know, they have to win it. That's the outside perception, and that will only increase. But I think she's a manager that will rise to that challenge. So if she wins the tournament, if she doesn't, I personally don't see any changes. I think her contract is till 2027, if I remember rightly, and I think she will continue to the end of her contract as Lionesses manager.
Okay, well, let's our job is to analyse football, but predicting it is a mugs game. But I'm going to ask you to do it, Courtney. What does your head and your heart say the result might be on Sunday?
Yeah, of course you are. You're asking me to put myself in that position. I think, you know, my head says Spain, I'll be honest, and I've said that through the start of the tournament. Obviously, my heart wants it to be the Lionesses, but it's going to be, I think, a close-run game. I think it's probably a goal either way, let's say 2-1. But let's go with my heart today and say 2-1 Lionesses and retaining the Euros.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. As we saw, thank Courtney Sweetman-Kirk there. As we saw in both teams making the progress they have done, neither of them are defensively impregnable. So she's right, there will probably be goals for both sides. Looking forward to it hugely. Someone here, Simon, just turned on talkSPORT. I had to check on my calendar what day it is. Can someone please take Simon's temperature to check he's okay? A 5-day week is unheard of.
Indeed.
That's your mate Chris in Shropshire.
Oh, very good.
And just making sure you're okay there, Simon. Okay, Newcastle callers, you know the number. It's 03717 223344. There's a million things we can talk about. Why is it that Newcastle are not getting the players they want? Is there something stopping them from becoming the elite club that some people say they're not? Just get your views on all of this. 03717 223344. What should they do to keep Alexander Isak, or is there a point when they have to sell him? That's next here on talkSPORT.
Bazball. England's approach to Test cricket under Kiwi coach Brendan McCullum. What is it really, and is it working? We've had a look. Is it just aggressive batting? That is a big part of it. Test teams around the world are scoring faster all the time, but the Bazballers are the fastest scoring Test team ever.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Of course, when you ask Liverpool fans, but particularly Newcastle fans, to come on and talk about the situation at Newcastle, it is, in my opinion, I'll say these words, it is a great football club. I love the fact it's right in the middle of the city. I love the fact that the city once the football, when the lights are on for an evening match, the whole city is lit by the football stadium, and the energy emanates out from the football club. But it is having trouble this summer attracting the kind of players they probably feel they need to move on to the next level. And that's now been made more prominent, I guess is the word you'd use, by the news that Alexander Isak, whether he's got a thigh injury or not, is probably keen to either have his wages increased to superstar status or to get away from them.
There's such a dearth of talent in this particular position. So Newcastle have been successful in buying lots of players, albeit they've had challenges with Tonali. But Guimaraes has been a success. Other players they've all been a success. But this particular position, there's such a dearth of them around the world that it makes Newcastle a little bit of a hostage to fortune.
I mean, we would go back again to playing two up front, but since we went to one striker up front, of course, there are only a handful of them that are worthy of the name, and so the Premier League is...
There's lots of pretenders, isn't there? I mean, I don't mean pretenders in terms of they don't make the endeavours, but if you look at Darwin Núñez and you look at, say, Rasmus Højlund, and they've been bought for big dough.
Huge money, yeah.
And miles away from it.
Yeah.
Miles away from it.
Who's the first caller? Who should we get? Is it Gary we're going to first?
Hi, boys. How you doing?
Hello, Gary. Great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. What do you want to say, my friend?
I've got a couple of things. I'm just getting out of hospital after being in for a little while. And all of this Isak thing, when I've read about it and sort of heard about it, I thought, I'm not surprised. If the Benn wants to go somewhere else, then you've got to let him go because he's not going to play for us. If we can't afford to pay his wages and somebody else can, let him go. But I've got something a bit more specific for Simon. I might be being a bit thick here. I probably am because you think I'm a Geordie and all Geordies are thick. Now, you were going on about Liverpool's turnover being £700 million. And Newcastle's been about 350.
Yeah.
300. Are you saying, is it fact that until we get the sort of levels of 700, 800 million pounds turnover, that we're always going to be in this position?
Well, I mean, if you look at the reality of it, is you're restricted by what you can spend because you're governed by PSR. So you're only allowed to lose a certain amount of money. And B, when they change the parameters slightly, so they start moving it towards a salary position, whether you take 70% of your turnover, which is their scenario that they want to work through with UEFA. So if you've got 70% of your turnover can go on, say, salaries and transfer fees, or the depreciation on transfer fees. If you've got a £350 million turnover, Gary, you can only get wages of 210 million. If you're Man City and you've got a £600 or £700 million turnover, or Liverpool 500 or 600, you can have wages of 400 million. So all of a sudden, the amount you can spend on players, both from transfer fees and wages, are dwarfed at Newcastle in comparison with the clubs that are already in the position that Newcastle want to be in, which I think is unfair and wrong, and doesn't create the kind of Premier League that we've had for the last 32 years.
However, the counter-argument, excuse me 1 second, Gary, the counter-argument is that if you happen to be owned by the Saudi Investment Fund and there were no regulations, then Newcastle would have the 20 best players in the world all at their disposal, and there would be no Premier League.
Maybe, but I mean, we didn't have the 20 best players in the world land at Man City when they had no restrictions upon them, did we? We didn't see the 20 best players in the world all land at Chelsea. There was still competitivity.
The 50 best players in the world at Chelsea.
Well, we see it now, ultimately, but we Chelsea and Man City. Let's not lose sight of the fact that the Middle Eastern guys own football clubs for a variety of reasons, but they're not fools, and they don't want to lose money unnecessarily. They're quite prepared to use it as seed capital for the other things that they want to achieve via sport, but they're not fools. If you talk to people like Turki Al-Sheikh about the boxing world, he knows full well that the money they've spent at some point is going to be rowed back by MBS in his part of the world, and ultimately turned into a commercial revenue stream that actually makes sense. So I think if you've got a football club and the owner's ambition is to be able to push it, Jack Walker did it once upon a time with Blackburn. It was followed on by obviously by Roman Abramovich, and subsequently by Sheikh Mansour. And I think Newcastle and clubs like this, when we put the sustainability argument into the equation, it's ludicrous. And we've opened the Premier League for business, Dan. And whether we like it or we don't like it, and whether we think that things should be a bit more under control, what is it that we're doing by changing the direction of travel? We can't help Reading, and we can't help Morecambe and Bury, because that's taking it to the other extreme.
No, and that was the point I was going to make, that the panic about sustainability came about on the back of one or two famous old clubs, including Bury, going to the wall. But that's to compare chalk and cheese. Nobody is a bigger fan of the pyramid than me, and I want clubs to be able to go through that pyramid. But to pretend that Bury Football Club, a community club with its history and all the rest of it, is the same as the kind of operation that they're operating at Manchester City or Newcastle now is ludicrous. And so the same rules were brought in to cover everybody, and it's not right. Let's talk to, who's the next one? Richard is in Newcastle. Hello, Richard. Oh, sorry, James is next. I'm not doing them in the right order here. Hello, James in Newcastle. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you doing?
Really good. Good to hear from you. What is he going to tell us?
Good. Nice to see you. Just very quickly, I mean, Simon's taken the wind slightly out my sails there on the previous caller, but just how corrupt I find it all is. I mean, I've been a Newcastle fan for 35 years, and lots and lots of ups and downs. And now on the way up, it's like a dream getting the PIF involved, the richest people in the world owning our football club, and I know that comes with other things, but that's
with baggage. Certainly, it does. Yeah,
with baggage, yes. That's another argument. But we are the richest football club in the world. Now, you tell me, in any other situation in life, the richest company in the world has to sell one of their best assets to another company that isn't as rich as them. It's just ludicrous. And these things came in just after the Newcastle takeover. They were deliberately...
But this is a different argument with Isak. I understand your point, and it's very salient, but it isn't in this instance, because Isak is not going to leave Newcastle because Newcastle need to comply with PSR.
No.
He's going to leave Newcastle because he thinks perhaps playing for Liverpool is a better opportunity to win the Premier League and play in top European football and win European competitions. But your essential point is that there is a PSR underlying perspective, because if Newcastle can't expand, then there will be a continual gravy train of Alexander Isaks landing at Newcastle and being bought by the football clubs unless Newcastle can bridge that gap.
And I completely understand that. That's the argument kind of you're looking at, because we can't afford to pay the big wage. I mean, people are going on saying, Buemo turned us down, João Pedro turned us down. And I get that, because at the moment we can't pay the wages. But if you put 100 grand more in front of Buemo than Manchester United were paying, he's going to choose us. Players are fickle, you know.
Sure.
A lot of them buy money. And what I would say, Simon, what do you think of this argument? So I've been thinking this, because I think it's similar to what Chelsea are doing, selling their women's football club to each other, selling car parks, you know. How about we sell Alexander Isak to a PIF-owned club in Saudi Arabia for 150 million, and get them to loan him back to us?
Yeah.
It would cause absolute outrage. It would cause absolute outrage, but it's surely just doing what Chelsea did.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's how ridiculous the PSR is. The PSR governance was killed by Chelsea. The moment Chelsea sold their women's teams and the hotels to themselves, ultimately that was the end of the real reality of PSR, and there needs to be some thought through, and it needs something as bleeding obvious and as quite bold and brazen as something like a Saudi club buying Isak and loaning him back to Newcastle, and see how they deal with that one.
And yeah, it's so odd, because except for people like me moaning about how Chelsea had refinanced themselves twice, the authorities just blithely carried on as though, because these rules they make, therefore, are, if you're the wrong club, suddenly they're cracking down. Here comes a points deduction. They're afraid to take on Chelsea, I think, because their owners are so...
I mean, we'll see with Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea have got the challenge coming down the line of the sins that Roman Abramovich had brought to bear when he made illicit payments, and they've got that to deal with. And we'll see how bold the Premier League are when they sanction Chelsea on that.
Okay, who's the next call? Is it James? Hello. He's not there just yet. I mean, the problem with... Sorry, one of the problems with the when you set these financial rules is they have to have teeth, Simon. And
well, up until this point, they've had...
What they've got is dentures at the moment. One minute they're in, 1 minute they're out.
They've had teeth insofar as they put financial restrictions on clubs in terms of they fund them financially, and nobody cared.
Hilarious.
Because they baked it into their thinking and said that's the cost of doing business. Now what's given them more impetus is they eventually alighted upon the fact that we'll put points on people, then everyone's livened themselves up. I don't think it's fair to say that there is a different approach to the bigger football clubs than there is to the smaller football clubs. I think that the offences... Palace's circumstance is their own fault. Everton's circumstance was their own fault. And the purpose of an appeal is to be able to appeal something. And it was rectified. And the Everton situation, which was very, very harsh, was rectified on appeal. And that's why you have an appeal process. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Liverpool have been sanctioned by the Premier League before. When they tapped up Virgil van Dijk, they got smacked. So it's not beyond the wit of people to deal with these football clubs properly.
But there's a part of me, Simon, that wonders whether the delay in announcing that Manchester City are innocent or guilty, I'm going to say it. I wonder if they're just afraid that this will end up in the courts, and they have much deeper pockets in the Premier League. They can keep them tied up for years.
They know it will end up in the courts, and it's not a case of they're afraid to do it. I suspect they're being ultra careful. And first of all, the process has taken so long because Man City have been so uncooperative at certain times. People say, well, why should they cooperate? Why should they be
facilitating? That's in the rules.
Well, the reasons why they should is because they keep on telling everyone they've got unequivocal innocence, and to my mind, they would want to prove that from the get-go.
Yes.
But the fact is that I don't think it's a case of they're sitting there working out how to get out from underneath. But I also do agree that there's probably likely to be a deal done because the corridors of power reach far beyond just football in this particular instance. And we've seen previously, we saw the leakage of letters from MBS to Boris Johnson about the Newcastle takeover. So we know it's not beyond the ability for people to reach into football and say, excuse me, we want different treatment for our situations and our circumstances. But I think it's more to do with the fact that the Premier League and their independent panel know that they're dealing with people that are incredibly adept, incredibly sophisticated, and have unlimited resources to be able to wheel in the best legal teams from Lord Panic downwards to be able to make sure, and they've already driven a bus through the Premier League's APT rules, and rightly so, by the way, because they were not fit for purpose. And they'll do the same with this. So I think they're being very careful to make sure that every part of the considered decision comes out in a way that passes a sniff test of some shape or description, whether it's in or out. By that I mean guilty or not guilty.
Now look at me. I'm a man of a certain age, but I'm pretty healthy. Could lose a few pounds, as you always tell me. Do you think I'll live to see this decision being made one way or the other?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yes, you will.
Good. Okay. Well, when we come, it's an amazing weekend for sport, as we've already discussed. They got the Women's European Championship final. The Tour de France, which we'll talk about later, comes to its climax. And of course, to tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock our time, the British and Irish Lions will make history, at least with the size of the crowd, and maybe by winning the series in Australia. We'll look at that next here on White and Jordan, Kelly and Jordan, Jordan and Kelly on talkSPORT.
Of lines. From misty pubs and muddy boots, they flew with banter, stakes and suits.
Here we go, test match series, up and running. The Lions kick off.
The Lions, bold, a touring band, to point red streaks on Aussie land.
Glide into the right-hand side.
1 minute scrums, the next to sing, a pride that jokes but fears nothing.
We are taking them, boys, to the Hurt Arena this weekend.
The Wallabies are pulling up. Jorgensen will take it out to the air, and Jorgensen scores in the right corner.
To win this series, you had to win 2 games, and that's what we're going to go and do next week.
Scottish Grant and Leinster Soul, a Cockney jab and Valley's roll. 4 nations, one very wild crew, with dreams stretched deep in red, gold, white, green and dark blue.
The British and Irish Lions win 2 games to 1 with a remarkable performance in Sydney.
Came as men from different shores to go into test week. Let's hear the Red Sea roll.
That's great, isn't it? The British and Irish Lions lead the series against the Wallabies 1-0 after last weekend's victory, and you'll be able to hear this Saturday's second test unfold live and exclusively here on talkSPORT, with our coverage starting at 10 ahead of the 11 o'clock kickoff in the morning. Shabana Heung will be your host, and the former Lions Alex Cuthbert and Ben Kay will be on commentary duty alongside Andrew McKenna. And to help us preview what is going to be a historic night, a historic day here in these islands, one way or another. I'd like to say twice, British and Irish Lions tourist Gordon Darcy joins us. Good morning, Gordon.
Good morning. How are you keeping?
Very, very good. Listen, we can't tell here. You can. What are the players feeling? Because they can clinch the series tomorrow. They'll definitely be playing in front of a record ever crowd. So it's a huge occasion already, but they can clinch the series. What will the players, what is it like to be a rugby player at this super elite level in building up to the kind of physical confrontation and what they've got to do tomorrow morning?
Well, there's a couple of different things happening in the squad. Obviously, there's a few players not involved, so they'll probably be having a little bit of downtime, probably away from the match day 23 and any of the guys who might be on standby overnight. There's a lot of bodies over there. But for the players that have been given that nod for the second test, like this is the moment where I suppose you have to try and not get too caught up in playing the game, because the game obviously doesn't kick off to tomorrow. That emotional energy has to be managed across the next kind of 24 hours so that they hit that match and they perform at the best of their ability. So like they've done this process, the hard bit's done. They've got selected, they've got the jersey, they've got the backing of Andy Farrell and the coaching team, and now it just comes down about execution. And they're like they're the best of the best of the players as you said, at the super elite level. So now it is just getting that balance right into the match.
Gordon, of course, I'm listening to your accent. You're probably unlucky not to be in the team, because Andy Farrell has picked 9 Irishmen. There would have been 11 if there hadn't been the injuries to Joe McCarthy and Gary Ringrose. Obviously, he's the Ireland coach. Familiarity, he knows and trusts these players. Has he done the right thing to go so heavily on the green jerseys?
Well, I think that's probably not the right question. Is there anybody that you were saying is probably should be there ahead of them?
I'm asking you as the expert, Gordon.
As the expert, I don't think there's too many close calls. I think Genge swapping out for Porter is probably one, but they're tactical maybe. They want to see if Andrew Porter could maybe do more in the scrum. I think you got James Ryan coming in. You could probably onto the bench. You could probably make a case for somebody else, one of the Scottish guys maybe coming in there. But I think everybody is there more or less on merit. They picked a large Irish contingent coming out, and I think they've justified their selections. I don't think there's too many contentious ones for me.
Okay, what about Australia? They're getting back some of their better players who were injured. They both happen to be big power forwards. They've also had a change in the front row. It seemed to me in the first test that Liner, who's of course very inexperienced, they just couldn't get their backs going. Is the bringing in of more powerful players going to give him more time to play, or are they just going to confront the Lions physically? What's the plan, do you think, for Australia? They've got to do something, haven't they? Because they were, until the revival in the last few minutes, Gordon, they weren't super impressive, were they?
No. Well, I think their set piece didn't function at the line-out primarily, and the Lions had really took that source away from them. So Will Skelton will come in. So you're bringing in 2 ball carriers, and rugby is we try to complicate an already overcomplicated a complicated game. You win the gain line, you get over the gain line with big ball carriers, and rugby becomes very, very simple. And that's, you've kind of set the scene there very, very nicely. So if Australia, they get these big guys coming, they get them over the gain line, they get quick ball, we will probably see a different player in Tom Lina if you're getting on front football. So it'd be interesting to see how they manage that. But that's where the game is going to be won and lost for Australia, is on that on the gain line. Assuming they get primary possession from the line out, they'll be looking for Valentini, they'll be looking for Will Skelton to carry them over the gain line.
And what's your instincts? Look, I think the Lions started this series as favourites, and they looked favourites in the first game. In fact, given that they're a scratch team, all right, they've had a few weeks to prepare, they're a scratch team. It was Australia who looked undercooked. Can you see the gap closing in this test, given that Australia have reinforced their pack and have had another week to get the basics right? Or are they just not good enough, Gordon?
I can't. I'll be honest. I think the gap is too far to close. And I think the team that Andy Farrell has picked, the bench that he has picked, is very, very strong. When you look at the impact that, say, 16 to 23 can have on that game, and the quality they have on the field starting, I think it's just going to be too much. You need a massive underperformance from the Lions, as well as a massive outperformance from Australia. And while that can absolutely happen, I can't see it happening in this match. I just think the Lions will have too much. I think they have too much firepower on the bench. And you look at, say, even the players they picked, and like Zach Morgan coming in, he's picked Owen Farrell on the bench. He's picked players that will add value, and if it's a tight match, can change it.
We're exactly 24 hours from kickoff, Gordon. Is there any part of you that wishes you still had your boots and was playing?
Absolutely none. I look at those matches. Some of those players. I loved my time at it. And my kids regularly remind me that they're nearly faster than me now. So I think I'm quite happy to sit there and be a supporter these days.
Okay, well, yourself and Brian and Jessica weren't a bad partnership. Listen, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on talkSPORT. And as to remind you again, live coverage starts at 10:30 with Shabana Hearn here on talkSPORT as we build up to the 11 o'clock in the morning kickoff in the MCG, where even without an absolutely sold-out crowd, and I think it will be sold out, it will be a record crowd watching the British and Irish Lions taking on Australia. Thanks to Gordon Darcy from joining us there. We'll be back in a few seconds' time. Big story from Simon's world. The sale of Crystal Palace, complicated though it looks to nitwits like me, has been completed. We'll talk about what that means next for Palace and others going forward. You're listening to talkSPORT, and that is exactly how you should be spending your Friday.
Football fans all have stadiums we love, but do any of us have a pitch that we love? It might sound like an odd question, but pitches can be different sizes with big consequences. Why is that? And what are the actual rules? Back when association football started, pitches could be up to 100 metres wide and 200 metres long. That's longer than Ellen Road. Not the pitch, the stadium. Anyway, UEFA wanted a standard across Europe for international matches, which became 105 metres long and 68 metres wide. But some clubs have been rebels, not intentionally, but because of the stadiums. Take Highbury, for example. It was 5 metres shorter and a metre narrower, meaning away sides had a challenge to adjust. White Hart Lane was exactly the same. And actually, when Spurs temporarily moved to Wembley, they asked the FA to shorten the pitch. The FA, very offended by the sacrilegious suggestion, said no, which in fairness could have actually benefited Tottenham, because when they moved into their shiny new stadium, the pitch was exactly the same size as Wembley's. Today, Forest pitch at the City Ground is a big one. It's 2 metres wider than any other pitch in the Premier League. But the smallest of all, Craven Cottage, just 100 metres long and 65 wide. No excuse for not tracking your man. There are a couple of crazy outliers in Europe too. At Napoli's home ground, the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona, the pitch is a whopping 110 metres long. At least they don't play on a slope like Newcastle do. There's a 2-metre incline on the pitch at St James's Park, and don't get me started on the old pitch at Yeovil too. It used to be a slant of 2 metres corner to corner and across the halfway line. So UEFA have their standards, so do the FA, but they do give pitches in England some wiggle room. Pitches can be anywhere between 90 and 120 metres long and between 45 and 90 metres wide. I mean, the rules state you can't have a square pitch, but in theory you could have one that's 91 metres long and 90 wide. Imagine rocking up to play a Sunday League game and the pitch is basically a square. So there are rules and regulations on sizes, with a UEFA standard that roughly everyone follows, but as we all know, size doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, mid-mornings, very special one. Please stop sending in text taking the mickey out of Simon doing 5 days work in a week. This isn't his only work. He works like a Trojan, a Stakhanovite
Indeed.
normally. I also know what he's doing this afternoon in the way of inverted commas work, and I don't envy him one little bit because that really will be onerous.
He's probably listening, by the way.
A mutual friend, if you are, hello David, miss you man. I'm Danny Kelly, he's Simon Jordan. This is the mid-morning show, normally White and Jordan, but for the moment Kelly and Jordan. Simon, this is a story that I'm really going to need your help with because we're starting this hour. Look, we started with Newcastle and their travails as they struggle to escape from the straitjacket of PSR, and their players perhaps wanting more than they can supply them with at this present moment. But football finance, we have to keep talking about it, even though it sometimes causes me to go, please, players, get out on the pitch and at least play a football match. Crystal Palace, a club very dear to your heart.
Indeed.
Complicated issues in the recent past. Because of multi-club ownership. The fact that they've been, I don't know the word relegated, but moved from one European tournament to another. That appeal is very imminent, I think.
To be heard at Court of Arbitration of Sport, and I think somewhere just around about the middle of August, which people are suggesting is an awful time for it to be had.
It's
because
too
of the
late,
draws.
Isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. They're going to be in a European competition. The economics of what they're likely to achieve in the European Conference probably is the same as what they'll achieve in the Europa League. Not the same prestige, but they're likely to go deeper in the European Conference League than they are in the Europa League. So the money might work out the same way. So they can find themselves in a situation where they can buy for Europe now and can't use that as an excuse. But they lose the prestige of not playing in the Europa League. But they might actually find themselves in a different situation, which is having 2 seasons in Europe if they were to win the European Conference League, which I think is more likely than winning the Europa League.
But also, just imagine when you took over the club, and this has nothing to do with you personally. Imagine the idea that Crystal Palace will be favourites for a European tournament, which they will be if they stay in the conference. It's amazing progress.
It is, and we were, I think, discussing it the other day about what kind of scale of clubs haven't won anything in English football, and Palace being one of the bigger ones that haven't won anything until they won the FA Cup. There is an argument that says that Palace were remarkably misfortunate in the late 80s and early 90s when they finished 3rd in the league and were excluded from Europe because of the behaviour of other English clubs in Europe. You know, they were runners-up in the FA Cup. So they've had moments in time where they've had very good teams And obviously you go back to the team of the late 70s when Venables was in his pomp, in his early pomp, and they were billed as a team of the 80s getting 50,000 crowds. I was there as a kid watching us go top of the first division, beating Ipswich 4-1 with Brazil playing for Ipswich.
Kenny Sansom and all that lot.
Kenny Sansom, Billy Gilbert.
Yeah, fantastic footballers. But now, to take us away from the reverie about the football pitch, back to the boardroom, Woody Johnson, who you'll tell me who he is, has now acquired the shares. He has bought the Eagle football shareholding in the club, which is John Textor bit. Is this real? Is it significant?
Yeah.
What is the reality? What is the significance of it?
Well, first and foremost, he's the owner of the New York Jets. So he owns an NFL franchise and a very recognisable and big one. Second of all, he's the heir to the
although often the laughing stock of their division.
To some extent, well, maybe, but isn't that the Cleveland Browns more than anything else?
The Cleveland Browns are the worst in their overall. But if you go to the New York metropolis,
fair enough.
I mean, the joke in King of Queens was he was always at the Jets.
Right.
The loser supports the loser.
Right. But notwithstanding it, an NFL franchise is a very, very valuable proposition.
And I dare say it's doing very well financially. I wouldn't worry about that.
As they tend to be geared towards doing because of the construct of American sports, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at the fact he's the heir to the Johnson & Johnson family. So
baby powder,
whatever you put
that.
in your kids' nappies or poking your ears is some benefit to him. And so he's taken over the shareholding of John Textor, as people know, because Textor was brought in 2021 to help the existing shareholders, David Blitzer and Josh Harris and Steve Parish, line their pockets with his money and ultimately to navigate their way through COVID. As a result of Textor's investment, Palace have found themselves compromised in 2025 by a set of rules that they knew full well about, didn't do anything about, and now blaming Textor for, because multi-club ownership has been found to be visiting their door. Ironically, the irony is even greater given the fact that David Blitzer is probably more MCO based, who's the other shareholder in Crystal Palace, than Textor because of his involvement in other football clubs and the fact that he has the controlling influence in Bromby, albeit for a different vehicle. Now, what Textor did and what Palace have done is sold the 43% shareholding in all its glory to Woody Johnson. That tells me at some point that Woody Johnson is likely to be their exit strategy, full stop, because he doesn't strike me as someone that has the wealth or the wherewithal to want to share businesses with other people.
So just you think ultimately he will be the owner of Crystal Palace?
I would think so. Not anytime soon, but the control in Crystal Palace is seeded in, or was seeded in, Steve Parish as the executive chairman and the other two board members voting with him in a way that their shares enabled someone that had a bigger shareholding to be voted down. Textor was the biggest shareholder, or Eagle Holdings, which is the vehicle that Textor used to own his shares in Palace, to own his shares in Lyon, to own his shares in Botafogo in Brazil, and caused all the controversy. And how much money John has? Well, only John can speak to that. But he sold his shares to Woody Johnson, took a haircut on it, in his view, because he felt he could get much more for it in order to facilitate an outcome. And you now have Woody Johnson, a very influential figure, a very wealthy figure in the Palace boardroom, which means that one of two things. One of the things that in my mind is that he could be the ultimate ownership further down the line, an exit strategy for Parish, Blitzer and Harris, albeit they're no slouches financially, certainly Blitzer. And on the other side of the argument, they also perhaps gives them some more working cash, because whilst Palace won't have too many problems with PSR, liquidity and cash and the availability of cash and how much it costs to get to be able to finance the purchase of players might be something that Woody Johnson's cash can lend itself towards, albeit most of it will go in Textor's pocket.
Okay,
or in Eagle Holdings' pockets, or in Leon's pockets.
Talk about a wider issue then. Let's say that Woody Johnson either has tremendous influence at Palace or becomes the ultimate owner.
Yeah.
Why are Americans so interested, particularly Americans who already have sporting franchises within their portfolios, to use a word I hardly understand? They keep coming and buying into the Premier League to the point where very soon you will have the 14 clubs owned by Americans, and then they could vote in, I don't know, they might vote in free ice cream for everybody, or they might vote in no more relegation promotion.
I don't think that's what they'll do. I think a lot of the American ownership models, specifically the Aston Villa ownership model, understand the metrics of what they bought into and the value of it. They don't like, of course, when you talk about Robert Kraft and the reasons why Bob Kraft, who owns the Patriots and the Revolution in America, the soccer team, was asked, why don't you buy an English soccer team? Because I don't like relegation, I like certainty of income. Now, that's a mentality that exists. That was 10, 15 years ago when that question was asked. They now buy into it, knowing the parameters of what they're doing and being quite invested in it. I spent some time in America last year filming this TV show, which I'll send you some copies of. You can have a look and give me your view on, because I want your opinion on it. I was very sniffy about the lack of relegation, very European in my mentality. But the more I spent over there, the more, of course, as a former owner, I saw the benefits of the fact that the owner is the most important person in the room, actually gets to lift the cups, but also the fact that the participation in the league and the winning team is not guaranteed. There's less monopolies in football than in American football.
Robert Kraft is a very good example.
Yeah.
They knew while they had Tom Brady at his peak, they were the absolute winners. Now they're dredging along the bottom because they haven't been replaced.
To answer your question, because there's so much opportunity and influence and financial wherewithal to be had around having sports media, and the relationship between the Disneyfication of sport, the commercial opportunities, and other businesses that you have, not just in sporting terms, but in access to clients, access to markets that you don't necessarily have, access to influence. But in the American world, which is really about pounds, shillings and pence, sports media rights are incredibly valuable, and we have not scratched the surface.
We've discussed this many times, you and I.
You know,
yes.
whether it's the Premier League starting their guns by taking back the overseas production rights that were with IMG and starting to do it themselves as the precursor to the thing that I spoke about 7 years ago, which was the Netflix of football, and owning their own delivery mechanisms and taking this 3 or 4 billion a year they're currently getting and turning it into 20 billion a year. All of these things are going to happen. Look, Bowley and his gang didn't buy Chelsea for £2.5 billion because they thought they were buying a pup. They bought it because they think it's going to be worth something for a variety of different reasons. Anonymized data, having access to customer bases around the world. And of course, the sporting broadcast rights are just going to keep on getting bigger.
Yeah, and because the model is the model which has served English football so well of subscription television is actually constricting it now, because as Simon and I have continually pointed out, if you made every match available from the Premier League for $2 globally, then the people in China, the people in India, etc., would soon dwarf the amount of money you're getting from some subscription.
I mean, there was an appalling irony that you can go and watch Premier League games in America or Australia for cheaper than you can watch it in your own country.
Oh, just the simple fact that I can legally watch a 3 o'clock kickoff in a country 120 miles across the Irish Sea on a Saturday. You sit back and watch the game because it's not constricted by the madness of the way we've done the television deals. It worked. It made the Premier League what it is.
It did.
It's now old-fashioned, and we have to move on from there.
Possibly.
Listen, the fourth test is in full swing. We're into the the third day of watching for talkSPORT in Manchester. Sam Ellard.
And England, Danny, 235 for 2, trailing by 123 runs, and are going along very nicely. Pope has 20, Root has 17. Lots of talk going into this match was about Joe Root, who started the match 120 runs away from jumping to second, remarkably, on the list of highest run scorers in the history of Test match cricket. Dravid Callis Ponting standing his way to getting to number 2. He needs 120. He's got 17 to his name already. He hit the first boundary of the day. A glorious flick off his pads of Jasper Bumrah, which raced away to the leg side boundary for 4. Siraj, bowling from the Statham end, got a ball to keep really, really low to Ollie Pope. Just misses off stump, but that's something to keep an eye on for the rest of the day. That low bounce from that end that Siraj is currently bowling at. India yesterday really, really poor with the ball. If they're not better this morning, this Test match and this series will run away from them. They're 2-1 down, of course, and need to win to stay in it. England, though, 235 for 2, trailing India by 123 runs.
Thanks very much, Sam. As I say, there are the climaxes of some huge sporting events, whether it's rugby, whether it's women's football, whether it is the Tour de France coming up this weekend. It's the Tour de France we'll turn our attention to next here on talkSPORT. Shannon, Coldplay are back at Wembley this summer, and we've got a huge VIP prize up for grabs for one lucky listener. We're giving you the chance to win 6 tickets in a private box for you and your mates on August the 22nd with full hospitality. Plus, we're chucking in 10 grand spending money, completely tax-free. Now, here's how to enter. Of course, it's 18 plus, and it's the UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. That's 83338 by the 4th of August at 11 p.m, and then you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, obviously. Or post your name and number to Coldplay Competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 7th of August. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's are available at talksport.com. Okay, we're reaching the climax in the next couple of days of the Tour de France. I'm here to help us talk about what's going on. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Luke Rowe, of course, himself. Many times a competitor in the Tour de France and a member of 5, count them, winning teams. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning. How are you?
Really, really good indeed. I mean, the obvious question straight from the start. Tadej Pogačar. I mean, I feel so sorry for Jonas Vingegaard, who would have probably won 5 of these things in another era. But it looks like Pogačar is going to win his 4th. Where does he stand in the pantheon? I mean, he really is one of the he's one of the greats, isn't he?
Yeah, 100%. And I think we're obviously going to focus on the Tour de France now because that's that's what's in the spotlight. But if you just look across the whole season, he really is taking the title of the GOAT, not just for the era, but I think of the best ever cyclist to live. He wins from February right through to October. He wins the biggest bike races. He wins a lot of bike races in different ways, and the diversity in the type of bike races he wins is vast. So yeah, he genuinely is the GOAT.
How much of that is he dependent on his team? Because of course, you as somebody who was a team member will know how difficult it is. But sometimes he looks like he could do it on his own. But that must be an illusion on my part. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that is a bit of an illusion. He relies heavily on his team. You obviously have 8 riders on the start line from each team, so he has 7 riders at his disposal. Whether it's to ride on the front of the peloton and shelter him from the wind, or keep him fueled up, going back to the car to get food and water. So no, definitely he could not achieve the Tour de France victory without that team. All the stuff behind the scenes and a lot of stuff that he just simply couldn't cover on his own. So they've got a part to play for sure. But at the end of the day, whilst it is a team sport, come Paris, there'll be one guy on the top step, and that'll be Poggy.
Very quickly, 2 riders from these islands doing great in the top 10. Ben Healy from Ireland, of course, via the Midlands, a bit like myself. But what about Oscar Olney? Nobody was telling me that he was going to finish it on the podium, and yet if he rides today like he rode yesterday, he's going to finish in 3rd place. An amazing achievement.
Yeah, 100%. Silent assassin. Very, he's up there. He's up in Scotland, but he's very, very quiet lad. Quite timid, but as soon as you put him in a bike, he's obviously a little pit bull. Like you said, he was 2 minutes 2 seconds off the podium going into yesterday's stage. He took 1:40 back on yesterday's stage alone, which leaves him just 22 seconds off the podium. And let's not forget, we're talking about a lad who's 22 years of age. So, the last couple of years, we've been a little bit shy on Tour de France GC success, if you're talking about guys, riders from our shores. And it looks like after the mites of, Bradley Wiggins, Geraint Thomas, Chris Froome, it looks like we might have another one on the horizon.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Listen, look, I asked Gordon Darcy a few minutes ago when we were previewing the British and Irish Lions if he misses being hit by men who are 17, 18 stone. Do you miss riding the 3,500 kilometres in 3 weeks?
No, I think, at the end of the day, it was a decision that was taken away from me. I had to retire through injury, but honestly, I don't miss it. And it might sound a little bit soft, but I look back and I just realise how much we had to hurt ourselves. It's almost like you just get fed up of hurting yourself, fed up of suffering. I know, like, you know, sports people are supposed to be big, tough and manly, but, you know, day in, day out, it just mentally and physically, you just, what you're putting your body through is, you go to hell and back in them 3 weeks. So, no, I'm happy I'm doing a bit of commentary. I'm working with one of the French teams, to Catherine Itouma. So it's nice working on the other side of the fence. It's a little bit more relaxed. You're allowed a beer in the evening. So, no, I'm happy. I'm enjoying life.
Listen, Luke, I know you're very, very busy, so thank you for taking these minutes to talk to us. Thank you very much indeed. Luke Rowe there, a very successful rider in his own time. How interesting was that answer to the last question, that he recognises that what they're doing to themselves, and of course they're parts of a team, but individually, the hurt. Because I spoke to a physiologist about the Tour de France, and of course the other two big tours as well. He says effectively you're running a marathon and a half at world record pace for 3 weeks every day for 3 weeks. Well, they get 2 rest days.
Well, the interesting thing about lots of sportsmen is when you ask them when they've retired about their views of missing the industry that they're in, a lot of them will talk about the rigours and vigours and the struggles and the physical challenges they had to overcome that they don't wish to overcome now. But the question also could be expanded out to, because it isn't just the physical challenges that sport brings, it's the mental stimulation that it provides for these elite personalities that have these alpha mindsets to achieve things. So if you ask the question slightly different, do you miss it mentally and the approach? Because I do a lot of sport, and obviously not elite sport, but I live for doing sport, and I find the endorphins.
You're good at paddle.
Indeed. And so you speak to them, like we talk about Tyson Fury, in a boxing point of view, Tyson Fury wanting to be back into boxing because it helps him with the bipolarity and the issues that he has mentally. And I saw the other day, we had some experiences of Bradley Wiggins about 3 or 4 years ago, and Bradley was a little difficult to deal with.
Yes.
Which I think is fair to say. The Bradley Wiggins that came onto a show with us about 5-6 weeks ago was an absolute revelation superstar. The very person that I had hoped to meet 4 or 5 years ago.
When we did those shows, it was clear that he was struggling with something inside himself, whether it was retirement from the spotlight, whether it's something else, but he was clearly a human being that was struggling. I'm glad to hear that he was recovered.
Fabulous. He was absolutely brilliant. He was an inspiration. He was fabulous to talk to. He was dynamic. He was everything that you would thought that the Bradley Wiggins that achieved the things that he achieved. And he was also very blunt about people like Dave Brailsford, which was very interesting.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm really glad about that, because that was a difficult time. I was rowed in to see if we could help
I remember.
And I remember, obviously everybody's different personality, and,
of course.
Getting answers out of Bradley at that time was like chiseling stone.
It was a little bit. Not the same now.
No,
very different animal, gone through a very different journey. But what is, out of curiosity, what is your fixation or fascination with this particular sport? Because I've never understood it.
Okay, well, if I can nail it down to in 1 minute, it's simply this. Obviously, these are athletes who are doing something that is extraordinarily difficult. They're doing it every day. So I'm interested in the endurance part of it. But overlaid on that is that it is a team sport. It really is a team sport. The tactics each day have to be worked out in advance. And yesterday...
But lacrosse is a team sport, but you don't wax lyrical about that.
No, because I don't think it's quite as elite what they're trying to do as well. But it's more like chess. Yesterday, Vingegaard's team and Pogacar's team, they had a plan. They went out and executed it. It got blown up on the first big mountain, so they had to reorganise the team and the tactics. In the end, of course, the two team leaders had to go. They went head to head with him. Let's remember Oscar Olney keeping up with them. But watching over a period of hours as the bike riders go ahead of the team leader, then they're dragged back for various reasons. Often the people in the teammates of, say, Pogacar, on certain days, you can hear them on the radio say, I can win this today, and they're told, no, you need to go back and help
them. I have no appreciation of it and no expertise and any engagement, but I go down to a local velodrome because my young son is learning to ride his bike, so he's riding in the middle of it, and I'm watching all of these cyclists performing their formations and the speeds that they're going at and the margins of error cycling between positions. It actually has engaged my interest to watch the detail of how they're whizzing around the outer rim of this track and changing places.
Well, look, I advise you to watch a whole stage one day. It will take up 4 hours of your time, but
Okay.
you can be doing.
That's a bit of a reach then.
Absolutely, and listen to the way the commentators describe the tactics, and you get into it after a while. You definitely get into it, and of course the place to watch it is a TNT and Discovery Plus. Ola Shenaway presents the show with extraordinary vigour, and they're all really, really good. And I will watch. Today is another big mountain stage, and then when the last stage into Paris, except for one glorious year of Greg LeMond's year, is always a procession where everybody tipping their hat to each other and drinking champagne and stuff. They need to do what they did that year: make the last stage a time trial, because that fixed everybody with drinking champagne and saying it was great. And of course, he took the title on that day. So TNT Discovery Plus, they have great coverage of it. Looking forward to today myself. Meanwhile, because this is an amazing weekend of sport at Old Trafford up there in Manchester, the cricket, it looks like it's decent weather. I see shadows from the players.
Added 19
That's always
runs,
always a good sign. Let's get the very latest on England against India. It comes from Sam Allard.
Yeah, probably the best batting day we've had so far in this match. First 2 days, very cloudy, very overcast conditions. England starting the day well, haven't lost a wicket in the first half an hour, 244 for 2, trailing by 114. Pope has 25, Root has 21. If Root gets to 31, he overtakes Khalis and Dravid in leading Test run scorers list. There was just though a big LBW appeal. Siraj to Root walking across the stumps, trying to work the ball into the leg side. It hit him on his pad. Given not out on field, India did review it, but the ball was sliding down leg side. Siraj also nearly got Pope in his previous over, a ball that kept really, really low, but he bowled it outside of Pope's off stump, so he survived. India well below their best. Yes, their of the ball have been better this morning, being a little more consistent with their lines and lengths, but they desperately need to break this partnership. With England 245 for 2 and trailing now by just 113 runs.
Yeah, those figures for Joe Root, it's just nuts. I mean, given it looks like he could still pass for going to secondary school, it is amazing that he is closing in. I mean, he probably won't reach number 1 unless he decides to play till he's 40. But we watched this fella. He never caused any trouble or anything.
Well, it's interesting that the relinquishing or the relieving of the captaincy burdens probably have added longevity to his batting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. He's less worried about things than he used to be. But given how unflashy he is in the age of the scoop and all the rest of it, and the ramp, given how unflashy, classic player, wonderful to watch. The next thing we're going to do, Simon, is going to be right up your Strasser.
What is it?
Douglas Luiz has gone on strike at Juventus. He's a human being, but he also has a contract to the football club. We'll find out, is there a proper way to press for a move? Simon, calm down. Next here on talkSPORT.
It's not often you associate fan power with Chelsea Football Club, but one of the shining examples of it lies with a group called the Chelsea Pitch Owners. And they've proved to be the thorn in the side of owners past and present who've been dead set on moving stadiums to a larger, more lucrative piece of land. Essentially, the supporters group holds the freehold to the land on which Stamford Bridge sits. Former owner Ken Bates set it up at a time where some unruly property developers tried to evict the club from their ground. In order to prevent this, he established the CPO as a company that owned the pitch and offered the fans the chance to buy a share for £100. As well as that, they also own the rights to the name Chelsea Football Club, so if any owner wants to take them elsewhere, they can't be called Chelsea without the approval from the CPO. Now, in 2011, Roman Abramovich tried and failed to move them away from Stamford Bridge, and this has set a precedent for Todd Bowley and the current power brokers at Chelsea. They know any plan which involves moving from Stamford Bridge will require CPO approval from the now 13,000 fans who own it. There are fans who are concerned that if they stay at the bridge, they'll be left behind their domestic and European rivals who are moving to more commercially successful stadiums. But for the heritage and history lovers, Stamford Bridge is one of the iconic English stadiums, and to move away would be a grave mistake. It might not be as flashy as others, but stadiums like it have something about them that cannot be replaced. One thing's for sure, if Bowley wants to take Chelsea away from their home, he'll have to go through the CPO first.
Yeah, let me remind you, you're listening to White and Jordan here on talkSPORT Selco Builders Warehouse. It's where the trade go. But now, though, it's time to catch up on all the odds thanks to BetMGM.
It's showtime on talkSPORT with BetMGM. Get ready for the golden era of sports betting. Visit betmgm.co.uk or download the app. 18+gambleaware.org.
Yeah, backed by public demand is Charlie Robertson. Hello, Charlie.
Morning, Danny. How are you?
Really good. I mean, I'm overexcited for a person of my advanced years. I'm overexcited about all the sport this weekend, and I mean it. Let's start with the European Championship final, Spain against England. How are the Lionesses rated?
Yeah, just wanted to quickly mention before I crack on with a sort of preview, Danny, we've got a sort of early payout concession on this game. So if you back either Spain or England to win and they go 2-0 up, we'll pay you out as a winner regardless of the results. So that's quite a nice thing just to mention. And then, in terms of the final, third major final in a row for the Lionesses, isn't it? And a third consecutive Euros for Sarina Wiegman. They are actually the underdogs, though, England. They're 17-5 to win in 90 minutes and 2-1 to lift the trophy. The draw is 5-2, and Spain 8-11 to win in 90 minutes and 21-50 to lift the trophy. So we do think Spain are going to prove pretty tough challenges for the Lionesses. Simon, I think it was briefly discussed earlier, but I just wanted to get your thoughts. If England do get the job done on Sunday, which is obviously going to be quite tricky, do you think Sarina Wiegman will stay on, or do you think she might sort of think that's the furthest she can take England and move on?
But we discussed it with Courtney. Courtney Sweetman-Kirk, who has said that she has a contract till 2027. There's no indications, win or lose, that that's going to materially change. She has another World Cup to take England towards. She hasn't won that with England. So there's the challenge, I suspect.
And also, where does she go from here? It depends what opportunities open up to her. I mean, within the world of women's football, I suppose the United States is a huge market, and and she's shown that she can manage away from her home country as well. But I have no idea. Now then, we've been talking about the Lions and Australia. Coming up, what is it? It's live here on talkSPORT in just 24 hours' time. 11 o'clock kickoff tomorrow. Don't miss that. I presume the Lions are favourites.
They are indeed, yeah, pretty sure. 6-25 we make them, Danny, in front of 100,000 people at the MCG on Saturday. The Wallabies are 3-1. Yeah, you're not going to get make too much money backing the Lions at 6.25. So I think probably the bet is backing the Lions on the handicap at -9.5. I think for those that watched the first test, the Lions were pretty dominant despite the fact they only won by 8 points. So I think if they're in the same form this time, they should be able to cover that handicap. And just a couple of bets in the try scorer markets, Danny. I thought Tommy Freeman on the wing for the Lions could be worth a few quid at 13-8. While Max Jorgensen, who scored for the Aussies last week, could be a bit of value at 100-30. So a couple of bets there.
Yeah, Australians' problem, of course, is their nickname, isn't it? No rugby team can really thrive when you're named after a suede shoe. That can't work for anybody, can it? Meanwhile, Sam Allard has been giving us the latest on the cricket. It looks like England are playing themselves into a pretty strong position, although it's fair to say, Charlie, the pitch is very benign and both sides will struggle to get 20 wickets. Who's favourite there?
Yeah, it couldn't have said it better myself, Danny. England are 2-7. Really, really good day for them yesterday, wasn't it? And as you mentioned, it looks sun's out on a pretty flat pitch. So, I think if anything, they're probably going to shorten up. India is 17-2 and the draw is 4-1. And if you do fancy England to pull on the runs, we made them odds on at 17-20 to score over 545 runs in the first innings. So our traders do expect Joe Root and co to score plenty today.
Listen, Charlie, thanks very much indeed for all of that. That was a look at the latest odds, all thanks to BetMGM. Visit betmgm.co.uk or download the app. It's 18 plus, and of course, begambleaware.org.
It's showtime on talkSPORT with BetMGM. Get things golden with responsible play at betmgm.co.uk. 18 plus gambleaware.org.
Okay, I've got some gaffer tape and very lightly taped Simon to his chair for this next 5 minutes because obviously footballers are human beings and they have their wants, hopes, desires and fears like any of the rest of us, but they also have very, very strong contracts for which they often are getting paid great money to see them through. But the latest player to get the ump with his club is Douglas Luiz, good midfielder, of course, there at Juventus. He says his relationship with them are broken. He's pressing for a move. He did not report for training on Thursday amid talk of a transfer to Everton with their fabulous new stadium, of course.
Yeah.
Simon, you must have been in these situations yourself. It's remarkably rare that players, quote, push for a move. They may fiddle about in the background and say to people, I want to go there. But it's rare that they publicly don't turn up for work. Or is there a right way to go talk to the chairman or to say to the fans or to push for a move, which is what Douglas Luiz is doing here?
Yeah, it's not as rare as I'd like it to be because, players can be very self-centred and it's a one-way transaction.
It's a very short career, they're going to tell you, yes.
Yeah,
but you're right. When you get paid that kind of money, you don't need a long career.
It can afford to be a short career, can't it? And quite frankly, the average workspan in this country is 8 years. So any footballer that's goes above 8 years has had a long career. So that nonsense is just nonsense. And the things I used to get very upset about were the ridiculous defending the indefensible from people like the PFA that would come on and try and justify why Riyad Mahrez could have a tantrum and throw down his, throw his rattle out because he couldn't move from Leicester to Man City when he wanted to.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous from Gordon Taylor and people like him. So I used to get quite upset with that and take him to task on air. But there is a right way to leave and there is the wrong way to leave. And I don't think there's ever a justification for downing tools. A player is entitled to suggest to the management that he doesn't particularly see his future there. He signed a contract with them, but he would like a change of direction. He's also entitled to receive an answer which he has to adhere to, which is you either get on with it or, okay, we'll work with you to find a solution because it actually isn't working for us either. And so that's an appropriate way to do it. Now, depends how sensible and grown up the agency in the middle of it and how divisive they want to be, because let's be clear, the real money for agencies in the moves,
yeah.
And they'll say, oh, no, it's not. We like to retain relationships. When you listen to a lot of old fanny that Keir's reaction comes out about how we fix things as much as we break them. No, you don't. You break them. And then you break them again. And so with that in mind, I think there was a way to operate. But because players are now almost autonomous in their financial position, they're islands in their own right. They are in a different stratosphere in terms of economics. So clubs can control them the way they once did. The Bosman ruling drove a coach and horses through contracts anyway.
And that was a pretty good thing, actually.
Yeah, it probably got too far one way now.
Sure, but it was almost I don't want to misuse the word slavery, but but the conditions of employment for footballers were ridiculous.
Well, the ability to retain a registration and after a contract had expired probably was a little bit onerous.
Yeah.
And it needed to find a little bit more sophisticated thinking than going from one extreme to the other. In the same way that Bob Lord was a land baron at Burnley that treated all his people like serfs, you've now gone to the other extreme where the players themselves are dictating the terms of what they will and won't do.
Yeah.
Now, I spent some time over in Italy last year with Andrea Agnelli, the former owner of Juventus, who, by the way, is a fascinating man.
Right.
A fascinating man, a real insightful character. And obviously you get the scale of Juventus. So it's interesting to see that Douglas Luiz, who left Villa last year to go to Juve, which is the people's club in Italy, finds himself out of sorts with the people's club.
Well, he's hardly played. That's part of the problem.
Well, that might be something to do with him.
Yeah, sure. I agree. I agree. He may not be up to snuff.
It might be the kid that went from Leeds to Kelvin, who went from Leeds to Man City that never got a kick.
Calvin Phillips.
Calvin Phillips.
Yeah.
It is what it is, isn't it? I mean, I had situations at Palace, two ends of the same spectrum to some extent. One with a player called Emerson Boyce, who I wanted to strangle because his mood was so fed up with. He didn't want to be there and he wanted to leave. And we went on a pre-season tour to America, and I just opened the American team. We had a team in the second tier of American football, and I went over there, and just Emerson was just in the most awful of moods, full stop. And I got so fed up with him, I let Wigan buy him. And then there was the other end of the spectrum where, because Emerson was going to down tools, I'm pretty sure. So
did okay at Wigan, I remember.
He's a decent player.
Yeah.
And he was given the opportunity by me. He was taken from Luton when he was on 2 and 6 and come knocking on my door every time he had a good game for more salaries. It seemed to be a monthly pay rise for him, which annoyed me in the end. But the other spectrum was Andrew Johnson. When we got relegated from the Premier League, Andrew was an England player.
Yeah.
And his revolting agent, Leon Angel, wanted him to move and try to orchestrate a move without me being...
That's his official title, is he? Revolting agent, yeah.
Yeah, and he hates me referencing him, and talkSPORT perhaps hate me referencing him all the time because he gets quite litigious about it. But I stopped Andrew Johnson from leaving because it was suggested that that you cannot take an England player down with you. You won't be able to do it. They'll leave. But I sat in the room and said, Andrew, you're not leaving. You're part of the team that got relegated. Here's what we will do. It's very simple. You will stay. If we don't get, and I'll give you a pay rise. But if we get promoted, you stay. If we don't get promoted the following season, then you can go, and you can go where you wish, which means I won't hold you back from going to the club that you choose, as long as they're not taking the mickey out of me financially. And so the agent was marginalised. The player did as he was told and stayed. We lost in the playoffs, and he went to Everton in the way that he wanted to go to Everton, because I could have got more money from Wigan or Bolton at the time with the late Phil Gartside, who was a mate of mine. And he wanted to go to Everton, and he went to Everton to Bill Kenwright, who was also a friend of mine.
I'm still gasping at you gave him a pay rise when they got relegated.
I thought it was a fair trade, because ultimately I valued him. I think he was probably underpaid, and I'd got him on a good contract. And so for me to make a decision to keep a player, I thought it was a quid pro quo. So I thought that was a fair solution, not just paying him off because he was my surrogate son, as people like to suggest, because he was a good boy, but because he was a good player.
Simon's given the
Find a solution.
Simon's given the player a voluntary pay rise there. Somebody get me a stethoscope. Thank you for listening here on a Friday. Well, yes, that is the voice of Simon Jordan. He is not AI or a hologram. He's actually here in the studio on a Friday. And I'm Danny Kelly, sitting in for the great man over the course of the last couple of days. Ben Jacobs joins us now because Ben is an expert on the goings in and out of Saudi Arabia. He often helps us out on Trans-Europe Express on a Sunday night here on talkSPORT. Little a clue for you that this week Trans-Europe Express will be starting a little later than normal. I know the regular listeners hate it when it gets moved, but we've got the women's final first in the European Championships. If that goes to extra time, it could be even later, but I expect it'll be 10 rather than 9. Good afternoon, Ben.
Good afternoon.
I say good afternoon. There's still 11 minutes before it is afternoon.
Yeah, I didn't want to make you feel bad there, so I just reciprocated, but it's almost the afternoon.
Ben, I can't think of a way in which you could make me feel bad in this best of all possible worlds. Alexander Isak, we're getting some idea that Al Hilal might be after him. Is there any substance to that story?
Not necessarily, because there's been no engagement on the player side, but Saudi dealmakers are prepared to place a bid. It might not be a bad thing for Newcastle United because it could inform the valuation. But I get the impression this is a bit of optics and ambition, like when a world record offer was made for Kylian Mbappe, when it was obvious Mbappe would not go to Saudi Arabia. Of course, if a bid does arrive, it's kind of PIF negotiating with PIF, even though it's technically Yasser Al-Rumayyan, the Newcastle chair, speaking to Fahad bin Nafel. But Fahad bin Nafel is effectively a PIF employee, and the PIF chair is also Yasser Al-Rumayyan. So it would be quite complicated. But my understanding is that Alexander Isak wants Liverpool, not Saudi Arabia. But don't discount a bid, because from Saudi's point of view, they can make a bid if they know it doesn't stand a chance, and it's a sign of ambition, and it's done for optics. But also, if they bid at an amount that matches Newcastle's valuation, it might inform the market, and it could even be a means of driving the price up.
Okay, well, one Newcastle player who we know is going to Saudi Arabia is Callum Wilson.
Callum Wilson is a target for Saudi Arabia, but we have to wait and see what the next 24 hours bring, because Luke de Jong is the #1 target for Al Ittifaq. They've made him an offer, also former Newcastle United, of $2 million net on a 1-year contract, and they've given him 24 hours to give a final answer. If he says no today, then Al Ittifaq will turn their attention to Callum Wilson, who's been linked with West Ham United, and also Saudi Arabia back in January as well. The club then was Al Shabab. So there is a possibility that Callum Wilson goes to Saudi Arabia, but not done yet. And if it is Al Ittifaq, Steven Gerrard's former club, it will be intertwined with the Luke de Jong saga, because Wilson doesn't yet have the formal offer, only an approach. De Jong has 24 hours to decide. If he says no, then the door is open to start negotiating with Callum Wilson.
A story that's very close to my own heart is that involving Spurs legend and, of course, current captain Son Heung-min. We know he has at least 2 more games in a Spurs shirt because they're contractually obliged to play him against the aforementioned Newcastle and Arsenal out in Korea. After that, I think all bets are off the table. Bids coming in from the United States, we understand, but I would have thought Saudi Arabia would also be very interested in Son's services if he decides he wants to leave Spurs.
Yeah, Son's been a target for Saudi since 2023, and in each summer, 2023 and 2024, he said no. The door's much more open now, so Saudi deal makers are alert to the opportunity, but LAFC are the side that are really pushing from MLS as well. And the expectation is that, as you rightly say, Son goes specifically to South Korea. I think the game against Newcastle United is on the 3rd of August, and he's contractually obligated to appear, providing he's a Spurs player. So what Spurs and Son have decided is that he's to do pre-season, to get to know Thomas Frank, to understand his future and pathway and minutes, because it is, of course, also a World Cup year. And then Son will decide. So if he wants to stay, that's fine. If he wants to leave, he can do so on his own terms. And a summer exit can't be discounted. But my feeling is that we're not going to know the clarity on Son until we get this pre-season underway. And if he leaves Tottenham, the expectation is it will be late in the window. And another clue might be if another left-sided or versatile but predominant left-sided attacker arrives. Matis Tel has been extended and signed permanently. That was always the plan. But one more could come in. And if another versatile left-sided attacker arrives in addition to Tell, then you would think that Son's role and his minutes would diminish. And that might mean that it's in all interests of each party to have a break now rather than in 12 months' time. But Son has his future in his own hands. It's entirely up to the Tottenham captain. And if he wants to stay at Spurs, the club are comfortable with that. If he wants to go now, they won't stand in his way.
You're right to say South Korea, there's a World Cup year coming up. They were the first team, I think I'm right in saying, to qualify for the next World Cup. I think they won all 16 of their qualifiers. Yeah, they won a first group and then a second group. They won all 16 of the games they played. Son's an interesting case, Simon. At what stage do players reach such importance and fame within a football club as he has at Spurs that they are allowed to just make up their own mind of what they want to do? Because I would, whatever he wants, whatever his heart desires, I'm cool with it because, as a Spurs fan.
I'm not so sure that he's in a position where he can make up his mind precisely what he wants to do. I think there's a contractual position that has to be honoured, but I'm pretty...
It's got a year to go.
I would imagine that Spurs are quite relaxed about Son, whether he stays or he goes. If they weren't relaxed, and I don't think it's just a case of the fact... I think that Son, to me, has been a little bit of a disappointment. I expected him to bridge the gap bigger than he did when the departure of Harry Kane. And maybe that's because he's had injuries.
They were a partnership. What we didn't see at the time is they're the greatest partnership ever in the Premier League in terms of stats.
I watched him a couple of times last season, and I like him as a player. I really do. I watched him a couple of times last season. I went to see the Spurs play United in the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup, which was a shocker of a game.
What a game that was, by the way.
Yeah, comedy of errors. The Spurs goalkeeper did his very best to help Man United back into the game, didn't he? But I was disappointed in Son a couple of times. But I would imagine that my gut feel is that Son will move on.
Yes, mine too. Yeah, mine too. And Ben, finally, interesting story that Manchester City, after James Trafford, who lots of Premier League clubs have shown interest in, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because their academy is so successful, they have to let players go, then they have to buy them back.
They had a buyback clause, it's true, and this one's agreed now, which is another disappointing saga for Newcastle United. James Trafford set to return to Manchester City. They've not activated the 40 million buyback, which is very much a protection at the time of the exit. Instead, they've activated a matching rights on an accepted offer from Newcastle United of £27 million, and that's seen by City as excellent value for money. So Trafford coming back to compete with Ederson, and Stefan Ortega expected to depart as a result. Interestingly, Burnley were one of the clubs that have been looking at Stefan Ortega, but we're not aware of anything advanced or close. Ortega is going to assess his options. I think he wants to leave and become a number one. Leicester City are another club that are interested too. So Ortega is going to go. Ederson anticipated to stay, even though he's had Saudi interest for the last 2 summers. And James Trafford going back to Man City instead of Newcastle United. And it's another top target that, unfortunately, from Newcastle's perspective, they've missed out on.
Yeah, it is fascinating just how many wonderful footballers all the big Premier League academies are churning out, but Manchester City are right at the forefront of it. And of course, they've got the best coaches in the world, and they're paying their young players a huge amount of money as well. Ben, as always, thank you very much. See you soon on Trans Europe Express one of these Sunday nights. Ben Jacobs there with all the latest from the world of transfers. Let's get back to Old Trafford. Joe Root closing in on one of the great records in cricket. How are England doing, Sam Allard?
England doing very well. 2-6-1 for 2, trailing by 97. Root has 31, Pope has 32. There was a big run-out chance for India a short while ago. Root pushing a ball to Ghali. There was hesitation. Pope wanted the run. Root didn't. Root ended up running through. Jadeja at Ghali throwing. So the non-strikers then just missed the stumps. Root would have been gone for a long way. We've seen the most vintage of Joe Root shots in the previous Bumrah over. A back foot punch through the offside. It was glorious. Bumrah's average speed in this innings, 83 miles an hour, is lowest since February 2021. And as Joe Root goes to 31 runs, he is now officially the 3rd highest run scorer in the history of Test match cricket, which is quite remarkable. England 2-6-1 for 2, trailing by 97 runs.
Yeah, Sam will keep you across everything that's happening in the cricket throughout the afternoon. You can listen to it live, of course, on the talkSPORT network as well. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll be getting back into the world of boxing and the news that already Alexander Usyk has been told by the WBO who he should start negotiating with as a mandatory challenger. We'll have that and much else besides coming up very, very soon. Where you're listening to Simon Jordan and me, Danny Kelly, on the mighty, mighty talkSPORT.
When Sir Jim Ratcliffe took control of footballing operations at United, the Manchester-born billionaire was somewhat welcomed in as a homegrown hero, ready to save the club from the dark days of the Glazers. But in just 12 months, he became a punch bag for many fans. So what happened? Let's take a look and you can decide for yourself. The important context here is that over the last 3 years, the club has lost over 300 million quid. And from day dot, Ratcliffe committed to fixing this, which of course is the right thing for the club. But what seemed to get fans' backs up is the way Sir Jim Ratcliffe, accompanied by Sir Dave Brailsford, went about it. For example, talkSPORT understands their lunch options at the Carrington canteen have been reduced to just soup and sandwiches, which the higher-ups at the club say will save them 1 million quid a year. Now that might make sense for many who don't get free meals at work themselves, but it gets a little bit more picky than that. It was reported that after staff brought some stationery, they were ordered to send sellotape back because it wasn't considered essential. The reward for being Steward of the Week used to be 50 quid, but that was scrapped and replaced by a paper certificate. And such is the grip Ratcliffe has on spending, he reportedly scrapped company credit cards, meaning some staff racking up hundreds of pounds worth of expenses and spending weeks out of pocket waiting to be reimbursed. But it's not just the stingy decisions around the amount of tea bags in the cafeteria. In 2024 alone, Ratcliffe oversaw 250 redundancies and more were announced at the beginning of 2025. Now, while there are people who acknowledge that United staff numbers are overinflated, it's the optics which aren't great. Because while all this has been going on, Casemiro's getting paid 350 grand a week, and the club forked out 14 million quid getting rid of Eric Ten Hag and Dan Ashworth. But United fans' rage doesn't just stop here at the cuts. Ratcliffe's unpopular decision to introduce a flat ticket price of 66 quid for every fan, even children, certainly did not go down well. For fans, it feels like the very foundation of the club's support is being attacked for the sake of making marginal financial gains. But Ratcliffe has backed it, saying if you shy away from difficult decisions, then nothing is going to change. And time will tell whether these measures will improve operations at the club and help drag standards up on the pitch. But one thing's for sure, his first year wasn't exactly a charm offensive, and there's still a long way.
I'm not much of a scientist. I don't know what a parsec even is, but I see very high-speed events being measured in parsecs. And this show is going by at the speed of light in parsecs. 2 hours gone already, Simon. We're not going to fit in all the things we wanted to talk about. Welcome back, everybody, to White and Jordan. Today it's me, Danny Kelly, and him, Simon Jordan, renewing an old friendship and a broadcasting partnership that talkSPORT saw fit to break up for the benefit of everybody, including you, the public. It's been a great. First of all, let me say it's been a great joy working with you again,
too,
and of course seeing you.
Absolutely, mate.
That's the critical thing. WhatsApp messages are fine. Seeing somebody in the flesh and giving them a massive bear hug is equally good. Now, let's turn our attention to boxing. We covered a lot of things yesterday, but of course it's always changing. So to help us get to grips with the latest stories, we're joined once again by talkSPORT's boxing czar, Spencer Oliver. Hello, Spence.
How are we, gentlemen?
Really, really good. Missed you. Liked you in the studio. Big energy. It was very, very good indeed. Well, overnight, Alexander Usyk, I mean, they don't let these guys, they don't let them get the sweat off their brow from the fight before the authorities are putting their oar in. But from what I understand, Spencer, that the WBO have ordered Usyk, quote, to begin negotiations with the mandatory challenger, Joseph Parker. Is that an obvious next step for Usyk?
Well, yeah, I mean, if anyone deserves the shot, it's Joseph Parker. You know, he's been waiting a long time. We had him on our show on Monday, Talk Boxing, and, you know, he still didn't really know where he stood when he was fighting again. And you sort of feel frustration for Joseph because coming off those back-to-back wins against Zhale Zhang and Deontay Wilder, you go, look, if anyone deserves the shot right now, and if anyone can sort of push Usyk, Joseph Parker's probably your man. So the WBO have now ordered Alexander Usyk to fight Joseph Parker, and I think that they have 30 days to negotiate a deal. If not, Usyk has to vacate the belt, and it becomes available to the next possible guy, which I think Joseph Parker is the WBO interim champion. Moses Itauma is the #1 challenger, so that's a fight that could happen. I know that Tyson Fury's still floating around, but he says he wouldn't fight Joseph Parker because they're good friends. So the obvious fight, really, if Usyk doesn't fight Parker and the belt becomes vacant, is Parker versus Moses Itauma, who the person that myself and Simon think is the next heavyweight light. He is the guy that is going to be the next heavyweight star.
Let me ask you both, what is stopping Alexander Usyk? What is stopping him from retiring? He has conquered every mountain that's been put in front of him, and in most cases conquered them twice. What's to stop him retiring, other than mountains of cash? Which he can't need.
I mean, you have to look at the psyche of the individual concerned. I mean, in the most recent fight, besides the camp, the actual fight itself wouldn't have taken much out of him because it wasn't a fight that Daniel Dubois was hugely competitive in. We've rehearsed that speech and dealt with it. I mean, look, to understand the psyche of a boxer, you're better going to a boxer. And Spencer answering the question, I think I actually had a feeling, which is often wrong with me when it comes to picking an outcome, that I thought that Usyk might retire in the ring after he beat Daniel Dubois. That didn't happen. He went off to talk about who he was going to fight. A lot of it was joking. But the economics, Spence, I mean, we know that the amount of money that Usyk has earned in previous fights wasn't matched by the fight against Dubois. Unless the Saudis are going to rock in and turn around and say, we're going to put a big barrel of dough on the Joseph Parker fight, which I don't think they will, then Usyk is fighting for fractions of the money that he's used to being fighting for the last couple of years, isn't he?
Absolutely, you know, and then you wonder, you know, where does that motivation come from? You know, we know he's a man of the people and he's doing it for his country, which is going through a bad time at the moment. We totally understand all that, but you go like, you know, this is a game where Alexander Usyk is now getting older. He's 38 years of age. Yes, he's still very much at the top of his game. We saw that on Saturday night against Daniel Dubois, but you go like, you know, it is about money as well. I think that the Saudis, Riyadh season, I think I saw something online saying that they didn't have an interest in Joseph Parker versus Alexander Usyk. Perhaps they wouldn't be bidding for that. And if they're out the game, then where does the money come from?
Can I ask you about Usyk's character, Spence? Because I think Usyk is steeped in principles. And it's interesting that he did an article in the Mail a couple of years ago, a really good article, where the girl that interviewed him did a really good interview. But Usyk talked about the opportunity that was given to him by Anthony Joshua and how Anthony Joshua gave him the opportunity, which cemented him by the nature of the win that he had, catapulted him into the public psyche even more than he already was. Would you think those principles would deploy from Alexander back into the Joseph Parkers of the world that are not being, and Joseph said to us, and quite rightly so, I'm not being given a fair shake, I've had a bad hand, I've had opportunities taken away from me, one of them was obviously the Dubois fight. Can you see Usyk having the principles to say, what was done for me, I'll do for other people, which is give them a shot in the same way that I was given a shot?
Yes, and I think he is that guy. I think he's that character. You know, I really do. I think that Alexander Usyk will recognise that Joseph is next in line. And if he's going to continue boxing Usyk, Joseph Parker has to be the obvious fight. I mean, let's have it right, Simon. Look,
or Ajak Caballero as well, Spence.
Caballero as well. But what I'm saying is the WBO have ordered it before the WBC. They're both
you're right. You're right.
So the WBO is, Joseph is the next one in line for a shot at Usyk.
But we all think that he's going to vacate, don't we? And Joseph Parker himself thinks he's going to vacate. If we move aside the principles of the integrity of Alexander Usyk having the same attitude towards others that was given to him, where would the money be? If he stays on for money, where will the money be for Alexander Usyk to get the £50 million fights or the £75 million fights that he's been able to bankroll against Fury? Does it have to be Fury coming back for a trilogy, which most people, despite Tyson's ridiculous assertions that he won either one of those fights, won't be that motivated by? Where can Alexander alight upon with the Saudis that says, this is the money fight?
Well, that's the $1 million question, Simon, because Alexander Usyk, you know, he's beaten Daniel Dubois twice, he's beat Tyson Fury twice, and he's beat Anthony Joshua twice. You go, so, you know, is that commercially valuable to see him going in with Joshua a third time, who's, you know, the biggest name in the sport right now, or Tyson Fury? You go, do you want to see that fight, or would you rather see Alexander try and clean up this modern era? And Joseph Parker is the only name, and Caballero, who you mentioned rightly as well, but he's next in line, and you go, if it's done the right way and Usyk wants to go down and be remembered the way that, you know, he's going to be remembered as an all-time great in our eyes already, you go, that's the obvious step is Joseph Parker, because I'm not sure you need to go over old ground with Anthony Joshua.
But what about the money? What about the money, Spence? Because if if Moses goes in and demolishes Moses Itauma, goes in and demolishes Dillian White, there's going to be a call for him to be given a shot. Wouldn't that be the money fight? Because that's the fight that Turki Al-Sheikh has alluded upon. I don't think Frank is as resistant to the idea as I originally anticipated he might be, because I think they think Moses is ready now. Wouldn't that be the money fight? Because you've got the new young lion that everyone's making a lot of noise against the old master. There's the money, isn't it?
Absolutely. Listen, and like it or don't like it, I think that Britain and British fighters, that's where the money's at. That's where, that's where the commercial value is at. And Moses Itauma, as we've been talking about this now for the last 18 months or so, Simon, that he's the new kid on the block. He is the next superstar of heavyweight boxing, like a young Mike Tyson who was coming through. So there is going to be huge value in that.
Spencer, just for people like me who are interested in the boxing but not experts like yourself, he's 20 years of age. I don't know how you can be thinking about putting him in. Tell me why Moses Itauma, and I'm sure you've told the listeners many times, but tell me why I need to be looking at him as the next superstar of something as difficult as heavyweight boxing.
It's quite simple, Danny. I think, do you remember, rewind 1986, the Mike Tyson versus Trevor Berbick for the world heavyweight title?
Sure.
Mike Tyson was in that sort of position where everyone was talking about this guy. He was blowing everyone away, the same as Moses Itauma was doing. He got his opportunity, he's got his shot, and he ripped the title away from Trevor Berbick in 2 rounds in a memorable fight. And you go, that was his coming of age fight. And then the Tyson mania just spread across the world, didn't it? And I think that's the sort of that's where we're at with this young kid, Moses Itauma. He is that good. And I know we're going to get a lot of stick people saying, "Oh, how can you compare him with a young Mike Tyson?" We go, we're talking about modern eras and fighters that are coming through. This kid is the kid, and that is what it is. You go like, we're talking about Moses Itauma. Oh, is it too soon? Does he need 6 months? Does he need 12 months? Well, everyone they put in front of him, he blows away.
All right, tell me 2 special qualities he has that's making him outstanding.
He's a southpaw. He's very heavy-handed. His timing is absolutely spot on, and this is the number one component. The key factor of it all is exciting, and people love excitement. Heavyweight boxing is all about knockouts, all about exciting fights, and I think that this kid ticks all the boxes.
He's knocking fighters on their backside. He knocked out Dempsey McKean, who was somebody that took Filip Hrgovic, who was a world-rated fighter, 12 rounds. Spence, on another subject, what's happening with Eubank Benn too? Yeah. Because ultimately, we're hearing various things. I think you understand a little bit more about the likelihood of where it could be, why it wouldn't happen in September, why it was originally mooted for September, and where it might actually go.
Yeah, so my understanding of all of this is, I'm sort of quite close with the Eubank team. I've got a good relationship with those. The fight was never going to happen in September. I think that the proposal was put to Ben Shalom, who was representing them at the time, about a fight happening in September. He said, well, that's a possibility. Let me come back to you. He didn't go back to them. And I think then it was just put out there by various people, put it out there saying September the 20th, the fight's happening. It was never happening. There was never a contract in place. They had never, ever received an offer even for that fight to happen. And with Chris Eubank Jr. and where he's positioned right now, he needed a long rest after that fight. As we know, Simon, the taxing on his body, etc., etc. We knew what he'd been through. The loss of his brother, Sebastian, it was his anniversary last week. He had to overcome that as well. So he hadn't even started training. He always said, November, if not December, I will be ready. Now we're hearing rumours. I think strong rumours are circulating today that they are in talks for that fight to happen in November. So don't be surprised we get Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. November.
So not off, as we were saying a couple of weeks ago, in limbo.
Yeah, I mean,
much more likely.
I mean, for me, given the fact that the pursuit of this fight from both fighters was about money, I know they can make the background noise about legacies of their fathers, but really it was about the money. If they had been offered 50 grand to defend their father's legacies, neither one of them would have taken this fight. The fact is that the money in the room for him, I mean, Conor's talking about going off and fighting for a world title against someone like perhaps Barrios or someone of that nature. He could have done that before this fight. I think they'll have a rematch, don't you, Spence? And I think they'll probably do it in Saudi.
I totally agree, Simon. This is prize fighting, and that is the biggest money in the room. You know, we all know that. The last fight was an absolute barnstormer, so everybody would want to see it again. Everybody would pay for it again, and I think it would be bigger than the first one. I think that, you know, with the history and the legacies of, you know, both the fathers and the family feuds, etc., etc. Look, it's an obvious choice. Yeah, of course, we want to chase legacies and, you know, become world champions, etc. Then they're always going to be there for Conor Benn, who's 27 at the moment, but the fight right now is Chris Eubank Jr. Look, he's getting older now. You know, we're talking about him being 35 years of age. He's had a long career, and, you know, that fight has to happen sooner rather than later. So, yeah, Marius Barrios is a fight, by the way, that Conor Benn would win, going off his last performance, that lucky draw he got against 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao. You looked at that and I go, well, listen, if I was in the 147 division right now, whatever level I was at, I'd be praying someone give me a shot at Mario Barrios, because that was a poor performance. But we're talking about money here, and he will get 5 times the amount of money to box Chris Eubank Jr. than he will Mario Barrios.
Listen, Spencer, thank you very much for the last 2 days, and of course last week at Wembley as well. Really enjoyed working with you, and also being the beneficiary of your wisdom about the sport, which I was sadly bereft of listening to just Simon. So thank you very much for everything you've done in the last week or so that we've been working together. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get ourselves back to Old Trafford, where England are appearing to make very, very good progress. Watching for talkSPORT, Sam Ellard.
Yeah, lovely progress. They resumed this morning, 225 for 2, now 280 for 2. The previous ball in Mohammad Siraj is over, perhaps sums up just where India are at the moment. In fact, it was Cambodia's over. There was a simple push to mid-on. Mohammad Siraj, the fielder, attempting a run out, missed the stumps, went through the wicketkeeper. I went through all of the slip fielders for 4 extra runs. That perhaps just tells you and shows you where India are at the moment. They look pretty low of energy in the field, pretty inconsistent with ball in hand. Even the great Jasprit Bumrah has been wobbler as best in this innings. They've just brought spin into the attack today. Ravi Jadeja probably was India's best bowler late yesterday, as Ollie Pope pushes the ball back to Ravi Jadeja. No run. Pope's got 46. Root's got 35 in the process, as he passed 31, became the 3rd highest run scorer in the history of Test match cricket. And this game, and perhaps this Test match and series, is just going away slightly from India here. England 280 for 2, trailing by 78 runs.
Thanks very much, Sam. As I say, there's commentary of that on the talkSPORT network, and Sam will keep you up to date throughout the afternoon, as we now are actually in here on the station as well, where you're listening to Kelly and Jordan with Selco Builders Warehouse. It's where the trade go. going to make a sound effect now, somebody opening a bottle of champagne, because we're trying to talk about alcohol next. Here we go. It's a radio first, never been tried before. How was that? Not bad at all, I thought.
And in Brazil, that's what he does all the time, isn't he?
Is that right?
And then it goes glug, 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 glug.
Yeah, he's not doing it with his finger in his mouth, is he? No, absolutely not. Listen, this is the story because we're hearing now that 7 WSL clubs are going to trail the idea of drinking alcohol in the stands at games. Now, we all know you can buy alcohol at football matches, but you have to drink it away from sight of the pitch, I think is the actual law in the Premier League. And anyone who's watched this super fast filling of the glasses at Tottenham, for instance, where there's a spigot that moves the bottom of the glass up and fills it in about a tenth of a second. Extraordinary.
I've seen it.
Extraordinary.
Daniel took great delight in showing it to me when I went to a stadium once. He was very proud of it.
Well, it was a big improvement because when I was regularly going to the old stadium, the teenagers, and they were teenagers who worked in the bars at half time, seemed bewildered that this crowd of people was suddenly and they got
descended upon them in 15 minutes.
This happened a fortnight ago as well. What the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
You know, they wouldn't even have any prepared. You'd think you had the first 40 just lined up on the... Anyway, the alcohol is for sale at the Premier League clubs, but among the women's clubs include all of last year's top 4: Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester City and Manchester United. And it follows an initial trial last term at some clubs from the second tier, rebranded, of course, this season as the WSL2, offered fans the opportunity to consume alcohol while watching the match. Now, my own experience of this is from non-league football, where my blessed father-in-law, when he was still with us, we used to go to Eastbourne Borough together to watch football. Now, maybe it was the standard of football that was driving us to the pint. I don't know. That would be very unfair, actually. But we would go. You could get a pint, sit there and watch the football match. Now, I've got to say, in December and January, this wasn't the big attraction, but at other ends of the season, it was very pleasant to have the squidgy plastic pint pot in your hand and watch the game and sip away. Simon, I guess the objection to it, whatever happens with this trial in the WSL, is that we all remember, I mean, I say all, those of us of a certain vintage, the terrible scenes in football grounds, pre-CCTV, pre-seating. I don't understand, the world has changed completely, but undoubtedly one of the contributing factors to that was alcohol. Now, I personally see no problem, as I think the world's changed enough that we should give it a go. Where do you stand on it?
I'm reluctant. I mean, there's an irony about it. This comes from somebody that changed the licensing laws inside Sellers Park Stadium to be able to cater for providing more drink before the game and after the game, so that we didn't have to close at certain times. So there's an element of hypocrisy about my views on it. But I also am old enough and young enough to remember the ascent, or more to the point, the descent of England fans in 2020 upon the stadium for the European Championships, which was fueled by substance. And it isn't just alcohol that's a problem inside football stadiums now, it's Class A drugs.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge for football. I feel that there's this thought process that why can't football fans be trusted? They can do it at rugby, they can do it at cricket. But I still think that there is a problem with allowing alcohol to be consumed more freely inside football stadiums. I know people will say it's binge drinking and they should be trusted, but every time something happens in football, it reminds me of the fact that it is a sport fueled by division and tribalism and confrontation. We still have, tragedy chanting. We heard not so long ago when Palace played Millwall in the FA Cup, the idea of a player being carried off and hopefully he's dead, according to certain fans, and homophobic chants being chanted at Benn by the Millwall fans. So add that extra component of extra alcohol in there. I think if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Now, the Women's Super League, it's a slightly different animal, slightly different argument. It's a slightly different audience. If you look at the components and the demographics of who's watching women's football, you can see what it is. It's families. It's a completely different feel towards the experience. It's entertainment with football in the middle of it, rather than this tribal division that's often fueled by an immense distaste for the opposition and a desire to say something very unpalatable or do something unpalatable to your opposing fans. So I'm not comfortable with it, and I don't want to be a stick in the mud, and I don't want to be not prepared to move with the times. And I was quite for revisiting the idea of safe standing inside football stadiums and all of these things that football fans want.
It's really interesting you say that, because in the build-up to the return of safe standing, I was involved in a debate in one of our bigger newspapers with Alistair Campbell, who Alistair was dead in favour of the safe standing, and I was still so mired in the memories of being at grounds like West Ham, Brighton, this was Spurs fans doing it. Yeah, absolutely war zones in the. And people talk about the 70s, but it was the early to mid 80s was where it really was. It was the main. I mean, to me, it was the main reason why the attendances in football matches were pathetic.
Football became. I mean, first of all, in politics, the politicians hated football. I think Margaret Thatcher despised the industry. The broadcasters thought the football had so little value, they didn't even broadcast it on the television in the 80s, which is why it's such a remarkable phenomenon that in the 90s it became something. I was for safe standing because, having understood the reasons for the Taylor report and the implementation which made all-seater stadiums for all the big clubs, there is also evidence that suggests that dynamic standing, which is people getting out of their seats when goals were scored, is creating a problem inside football stadiums and making the structures weaker. So I believe that people should be able to watch football in any way they want. I don't think you should go back to football stadiums that are standing only, but I think there should be a section of football stands that are enabling people to watch it in a safe standing way. And they've tested the retractable barriers and all that sort of stuff in places like Celtic, haven't they?
Yeah, and so that's an argument I ultimately lost. But my argument was based on things that had happened in the past and my own experiences. They weren't the science of today. Alcohol
it pains me to agree with Alistair Campbell, I can assure you.
Yeah, and alcohol's another step on. I'd love to get some calls on this. 03717 22 3344. We'll get you on before the end of the show. 03717 22 3344. Talk to us about the idea that you could watch the game with alcohol in your hand, or Simon.
I'm in the camp of supporting English fans. I'm the one that sits in this studio constantly getting irate about the idea that the British media call it the English disease every time something happens, when there's just as many bloody thugs in Italy, France, or Spain.
Sure, but you're right to mention those scenes at Wembley before the European final. It was a disgrace.
It was,
and not just to football fans, to the whole.
Yeah, I mean, it was also, you've got to look at the mayor and the police force for their failure to actually police the event properly, and announcing to the world that there was only going to be 60% of the stadium empty whilst not policing it properly is probably not helpful.
I mean, it really reached an apex when you put that firework in your bum. That was really extraordinary sight to see. And I've seen you do it at parties.
I did it myself, yes. I wasn't helped with it.
But do it in public. Unbelievable. Oh, wait, sorry. 03717 223344 is the number. You can text us on 81089. Just tell us your views. Are you in favour of being able to watch the football with a pint or a glass of wine in your hand? 03717 223344. We'll try to get you on before the end of the show. Actually, let's listen to the chief football correspondent for talkSPORT, Alex Crook, who had his say on alcohol being consumed in the stands at matches. Safe to say that he's very much in favour.
I think it's long overdue, actually, allowing fans, not just in the women's game, but in the men's game as well, to drink in view of the pitch. It seems a very archaic rule to me. The argument is that fans intoxicated are more likely to cause trouble. I go the other way. I think under the current rules, what you're doing actually is encouraging supporters to binge drink as much as they can before the game, get down at half-time, down another pint in 10 minutes and get back in their seats. I think actually responsible drinking would be encouraged if you're allowed to sit and have a beer or a glass of wine during a match. I don't think alcohol's the biggest problem, not just when it comes to football, but when it comes to sporting events, and we've spoken about this before, particularly with regard to horse racing. I think the use of cocaine is far more of an issue, as it was at the European Championship final at Wembley, than drinking.
Yeah. Well, that's surprised there. I mean, Alex Cook would probably be in favour of drinking a yard of ale in the studio.
I mean, he's right about cocaine.
He is, and we mentioned earlier on.
Absolutely, he's absolutely right about that. I guess this is one of those ones where we'll see how the experiment goes. But
it's not comparing like we like.
They're not apples. It's apples and oranges. The size of the crowd, the configuration of the crowd, the social background of the crowd. I hate to say that, but it's also true. Listen, next up here will be I'll be paying a tribute, if you like, to is he a sportsman? He's certainly a sports entertainer. Hulk Hogan was a superstar of gigantic proportions in the 1980s and 90s. I had I was going to say the honour, but slightly dangerous of a thing of meeting him, and I'll tell you all about that in a little while. First, though, we should get the latest from Old Trafford and the cricket. Here is Sam Mellard.
England 290 for 2. Ollie Pope's just got to 50 runs. There's 50 coming off 93 balls. Important runs for Ollie Pope. Lots of talk about his place in the team, but he's got a century in the first Test match and gets to 50 here. Before he got to his 50, there was half a chance for India trying to cut Cambodge, but the keeper, Jurel, was standing up to the stumps. The ball came off his gloves and wasn't taken by the keeper, but it was a tough chance standing up to the stumps. So Pope's on 52, Root's on 39. England going along nicely on day 3 at 290 for 2, trailing by 68.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Sam. There, and perhaps we're next up here on talkSPORT. We'll be talking about Hulk Hogan and taking your calls in what might be the most talkSPORT sentence ever uttered. We'll be taking your calls on beer.
Shin pads are a footballer's best friend. Even if players like Jack Grealish do wear such small ones you can barely even see them. But what's the story with shin pads, and are there actually any rules on how big they should be? It all started with cricket, actually. Cricketers had been wearing shin pads since the 1700s. It was thanks to this guy that shin protection made its way over to football. Meet Samuel Widdowson. He was a cricketer and a footballer. He played for Nottingham Forest back in the late 1800s, and he wanted a way to protect his legs from nasty tackles. Naturally, his mind drifted to his other favourite sport, where players had been wearing these pads for a century. Story goes, Widdowson cut up his cricket pads and popped them on before taking to the footy pitch. His Nottingham Forest team then began wearing them from 1887, and the first known use of them in a match was in 1894, in a match between Newcastle and the then Woolwich Arsenal. Eventually, FIFA clocked on that this kind of protection was pretty important for footballers. And so, in 1990, basically 100 years after Widdowson first put them on, shin pads were made compulsory. It became part of Law 4 of IFAB. That's the body responsible for setting the laws of the game internationally. But the law doesn't actually specify anything about measurements of shin pads. It just says they must be made of a suitable material and be of an appropriate size to provide reasonable protection. It's really vague, even though there have been calls for it to be changed. But for now, that's why Grealish and co can still get away with these ones, which are no bigger than a credit card and which seem to offer little to no protection whatsoever.
We'll get some calls in very soon about your attitude towards the return of being able to drink a pint or a glass of wine or whatever it is in sight of the pitch. That's an experience that's been denied to English football fans in the Premier League and before for a very, very long time as a result of the hooliganism that blighted the grounds in the 70s and 80s. First, though, for a few minutes, I wanted to pay tribute to, or just talk about, and maybe tell you a little story about Hulk Hogan. Has died. He was in the 80s and 90s. I guess he was one of the most famous sports people, if you count professional wrestling as a sport, certainly American style, in the world. I mean, it's hard to explain to young people just how, I would say, along with one or two baseball and basketball players, and maybe Larry Holmes.
One of the most recognisable faces.
Yeah, one of the
It's also interesting in wrestling terms, before you get into your story, was Muhammad Ali based his whole act upon Gorgeous George, didn't he?
Yeah.
So the idea that he came in the ring telling everyone he was the best and the most handsome and the most beautiful to look at was taken from a wrestler called Gorgeous George, wasn't it?
Yeah, the wrestling has always been bigger in America than you can really, and more influential than you can imagine. Hulk Hogan then became just about the biggest star in American sport. If you see the picture of him, it's almost ludicrous because he's a man largely bald with a really ridiculous moustache, bless him, and massive muscles, more about which later. But by using his personality and that thing of ripping open his shirt in interviews and all the rest of it, he became this gigantic superstar. He lived an extraordinary life as well. He made and lost several fortunes. I mean, quite a few expensive marriages, but also he just lived an incredibly lavish lifestyle. And it is amazing how in America, if you can turn the fame in wrestling into other businesses, and he did it very well. He was in films, in
major
Rocky
films,
3,
Rocky 3,
yeah. I mean, look at the Rock.
Reality shows.
Look at
big
the Rock.
reality shows.
Dwayne Johnson is the second highest earned actor in the world. So he's come out of all of that. So Hulk Hogan is was an amazing guy and had an incredible life. A lot of it very controversial. He ended up in court. He was asked to demonstrate one of his moves on television. Knocked the bloke cold. The bloke sued him for $50 million and all the rest of it.
And there were observations that he made that were, not of the most palatable kinds, wasn't there? That got himself into trouble at times.
Sure. So let me take you to my experience of him, and I'm very rarely slightly afraid, but here we go. First of all, let me tell you, I used to do a Friday night show at the BBC, previewing the weekend sport with John Inverdale. It was a pretty good show. We'd play old Steely Dan tracks, and John and I would chat about the sport. Of course, he had great guests.
He gave me a good review, but while you blocked it from winning the William Hill Sports Book of the Year.
I made sure.
Yeah, I know you did.
Yeah. Your ego's quite big enough, thank you, without you winning any more prizes. Interestingly, the show was recorded in the studio. It really rarely got used for whatever reason. This Friday night, we would go down the lift at the main BBC there in the West End, down about, I think it was like 4 flights, really into the bowels of the earth. Basement 4 it was, and the studio was tiny. And it had, inside the control room, but inside the actual broadcast part, there was a large steel door with a kind of a steering wheel, like you might see in a submarine. Right. And every now and then you'd be chatting away, there'd be a huge rumble. And eventually I investigated this, and it turns out that the underground was just the other side of that door. Right. So the rumble you could hear. And the studio had been specially constructed for Winston Churchill during the war.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that if he was broadcasting in the BBC, even if the building got flattened, he was so deep in it, and he could get out onto that and walk through the underground back to Parliament or wherever he was going. So that was a brilliant experience anyway. So come the day, in comes Hulk Hogan to do some broadcasting. Now, first of all, you got to be 6'7".
I was going to ask you, how big is he?
He really is a gigantic man, 6'7", and not a pick of fat on him, but he was also 300 pounds, so you can, and he did his act. It's an act, of course it is, and it was huge. Now, he'd been in a bit of trouble previously. He'd been involved with the steroid scandal that, surprise, surprise, rocked that particular sport, and there'd been some trouble as well with recreational drugs. I don't want to go into too much of that. The fella's just not cold in his grave. But as a result, he informed us, made a record in which he was encouraging the kids not to touch anything illegal. Right. I had been given a CD of the record, and of course it was absolutely rotten. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. I was a music snob then, and I'm still a music snob now, as you well know.
Indeed.
And so after about an hour after the end of the show, we'd had 20 minutes with him. He'd been fantastic, And he said, and don't forget, you're going to play my record. I said, absolutely, no problem at all. Off he goes. We have no intention whatsoever of playing Hulk Hogan's terrible music. So we're coming up to the end of the show, an hour and a half later. Thank you very much for listening to us. This weekend, don't forget, X is playing Y, and there's a big game at Z. And suddenly the producer, bless her, runs into the control room and says, I've got him on the phone here. Hulk Hogan has been listening. He says he doesn't understand, why haven't you played his record? I said, don't worry about that. He's probably back in the Ritz-Carlton by now, or the Ritz, wherever he's staying. He said, no, he and his manager parked outside the BBC waiting for him. So, oh my God, straight away, click into the... Bye, thank you, see you next Friday. And then this terrible piece of music fires into place. You can't risk running into Hulk Hogan in the street, can you? That's no good at all. Listen, of course, you know, he was a human being like everybody else and flawed like all of us. And, you know, his friends and family will be hurting today. And we should also remember, of course, he brought an enormous amount of entertainment and joy to people, whether or not you think, and neither of us think that professional wrestling is particularly a sport, but it is an entertainment, and he was at the centre of all of that. Right, let's get back to talking about the idea of alcohol. Jim is a Spurs fan. He's up next here on talkSPORT. Hello, Jim.
Hello, how are we doing?
Really, really good. What's your view on the possibility, if this experiment goes well with the Women's League, of the return of having a drink and watching the football?
Can I just say, by the way, just quickly, before we get to that, with the Hulk Hogan thing, I'm a massive wrestling fan. I'm not a Hogan fan per se, but just the fact that Ozzy Osbourne and Hulk Hogan in the space of a few days, that is wild, isn't it?
Look, if you look at any week in history, and you'll find people, you know, wonderful people are born, and people we admire have to depart the scene. We can't all be alive all the time. What's your point on the beer? Oh, he only wants to talk about Ozzy Osbourne there.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Who's the next? I can see a whole range of people here. 03717 223344. Mick is next. Hello, Mick.
Good afternoon, Simon. Good afternoon, Danny.
Thank you for joining us. A lot of Spurs fans involved here.
Seems to be the case.
What do you want to say, Mick?
I had the pleasure of sitting in the row behind you for a few seasons with my season ticket, Danny, with Irish Mary and that.
Oh my goodness! So, you know, this is why live radio is the best thing in the world. He's bringing together all the stories here. Used to sit behind me with an Irish Mary. She was a woman of a certain age, and before, if you remember, there was a gang in front of us at the time who used to go back and forth to the loo all through the matches, and you'd think this old lady would have no idea what was going on. And I remember one day she turned and said, "Will you lot sit down and stop taking cocaine?" she said. And so it was a problem even then in the football grounds. Can we get anybody to talk about the possibility of having a drink while watching the match? What do you think, Mick?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm happy at the new stadium with the beer that we've got available, and I still ain't worked out that voodoo how the glass fills from the bottom to the top.
Magic, innit?
Back in them days, we used to have bottles of Carlsberg that were always warm, that were horrible. At least the beer now is cold, and fair play to Daniel, he's priced it sensibly. But you have to have a bit of what Spurs, because I had 3 months off it last season, and I'm never doing that again.
No, that's asking too much of your nervous system, isn't it?
No. But I'll be honest with you, I don't want it in the seats, because you just know there will be certain Herberts, as soon as the goal's gone in, beer's going up in here, everyone's getting coated, and someone's going to get the hump with it, you know, and it'll probably go off.
Yeah, I watched the way in fan parks now they celebrate by all covering each other in beer. I think you have to be a volunteer for that. I wouldn't like to get covered in beer unnecessarily, so that's a fair point and well made. Let's get one more caller on, can we? Jim, you're back. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Danny. Yep, hi, I'm back.
Right, what is your view on this, the possibility of the return of being able to have your pint looking at the pitch?
I think it should be trialled. I'm all for that. I do remember they used to do this, did they not, for non-Premier League games like cup games and stuff? And I was at the Spurs Stadium for both the Champions League and the Europa League screening, and largely people behaved themselves.
Yeah.
I recognise there's always going to be incidents where that isn't the case, but I think women's football is in fact a great testing ground for that, because as far as I know, female football fans of female football tend to be a little bit better behaved. But if we can recognise this period and prove to the authorities that we can behave ourselves, why can't we be like every other country where it's allowed?
Okay, listen, thank you very, very much indeed for those thoughts. We'll probably return to this before the end of the show, which we're heading to now at very, very high speed as well. Let me just tell you the latest from the cricket. England is still rattling along. 312 for 2. We'll get more from Sam Allard before the end of today's show, which sadly, Simon, given that you've come in on a Friday, is now approaching. We could have easily done another 2 hours, couldn't we? Surely.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Kelly and Jordan on talkSPORT, and if you're enjoying it half as much listening as we are doing it, then you're having an absolute blast. All this week, as you've been hearing, talkSPORT is asking, what is the nation's second sport? We all know that football reigns supreme, especially here at talkSPORT, but what sport is the next best thing and why? And whether it's boxing, cricket, rugby, darts or MMA, these sports need your vote. So if you'd like to join the discussion, just head to the dugout at talksport.com/dugout or via the talkSPORT app, which I absolutely recommend to you. It's simple to use, I can use it, and it's really good. It's been the talk this of the office all week, with some talkSPORT names throwing their weight behind their favourite sports. Let's see what Alan Brazil, the breakfast host, had to say about his number one preference.
A lot of people ask me, Alan Brazil, why do you love horse racing? And go back to when I was a kid at Ipswich Town when we were invited over to Newmarket. Charles St George, who was a big Lloyd's underwriter, used to invite us to the Craven meeting at his summer house. It was magic. Lester Piggott was there, Pat Edry was there, Stevie Cawthon, and the champagne and caviar was out. I want a bit of this, I remember saying to myself. And we go to all the Newmarket meetings. Then there was Ascot, then there was Monday nights at Windsor, the glorious Goodwood. It's just magic, and it's not just about having a bet. It's going down, watch them work in the mornings in the summer when there was no football training. At 5 o'clock, used to go out of bed, get in the car, go down, first light. Absolutely stunning. Clive Britton used to look after us. And I just loved the people. Real nice people. It is the sport of kings and queens, but at the same time, when you get the bug, it's hard to get rid of, and I love it.
Yeah, why don't you head over to the Dugout on the talkSPORT app or via the website on talksport.com/dugout to sign up and join the discussion. Now, fun prizes are also given away every month, and if you join now, you'll automatically be put into the next draw. Of course, it's over 18s only. Terms and conditions do apply, and you've got until 9 a.m. on Monday morning, so get voting now. If I pushed you, Simon, and there's no wrong... Oh, of course, it's boxing, yes. And then paddle.
Paddle is a participation sport.
You're part of the paddle phenomenon, aren't you?
I've been playing paddle for years.
Really?
Yeah, I've been playing paddle for years, as you know, because I used to talk about it endlessly on the show that we did. And unfortunately, it lulled Gabi Abonglo into a full sense of security that he could dare mix it with me on a court. And after he had, metaphorically, his backside handed to him, sent back to where he came from, which was nowhere, I moved on to play better players.
Right. Well, you're working for the first time with producer Maya.
Yeah.
You need to play her at paddle.
It's
high standard tennis player like yourself.
You're as good as your partner. So ultimately, it's not individuals that you're playing against; it's against the unit. So if she's got a good partner,
you know a partner. It's Ed Huntley, the boxing king.
Oh God! All right. Hopefully, he can deliver a paddle tennis ball better across the net than he can deliver a boxing guest.
Well, you're talking about last Thursday. I don't think that was entirely his fault, to be fair. Let's take one more call then on this issue of whether or not beer inside of the pitch is a good idea. I say beer because it could be any alcohol drink. I'm just displaying my own preference.
Harvey Warbanger.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil is a Chelsea fan. Hello, Phil.
Good afternoon, Danny. Good afternoon, Simon. Great show as normal.
Well, you're very, very kind to say so. What's your view on... I mean, we haven't been able to drink in front of the pitch for 30 years. What's the story?
And I think it's a right thing not to do so. I mean, I used to do, when I was growing up, I used to go on a Friday night, always get drunk, always get in trouble, and things haven't changed. I don't say football is a football disease, but I think we don't handle alcohol that well. And when you get a small minority who are drunk and start, the other people who've had a few drinks somehow join in, when normally they wouldn't under normal circumstances.
But if you say this, and I've got no reason to disbelieve you, why? I was going to say, why is it not true in other sports? But you look at the behaviour of people at horse racing these days, and that's not all alcohol, as we pointed out. Maybe the days when football was the poster boy for this have passed us, because I did the Grand National for talkSPORT a few years ago, and I did a morning show, and by 11 o'clock outside of it was carnage. 11 o'clock in the morning. Now look, I've got no moral stance against it. Drink what you want.
Me either.
But you've got to behave though, because there's consequences.
Sure. I mean, I think we've got a strange relationship with alcohol in this country culturally. I think most countries look at us in a strange view of the way that we. As a country, and I'm trying not to be too generalistic and making the entire population a homogenised group.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But you know what I mean? And I think that there is an element of... There is a different feel about different sports. And I keep making the point, football is fueled by tribalism and fueled by division and by confrontation, even if it's just of a verbal sort. There's not very happy songs being sung inside football stadiums. Normally it's at someone else's expense and something that someone's got wrong with them. And so with that in mind, I think you add this component part into it. I think it's kind of strange that we feel the necessity to talk about the idea that we're consuming alcohol whilst watching something that we're supposed to be being entertained by. I get it. I'm not a miserable sod. I understand the reasons why people want to do it. And I also understand the comparisons and the resistance that people have when they get quite offended by the fact that other sports can have it and they can't. But that is because of the behaviour that's been exhibited. And you can only judge people, like in boxing terms, by their last fight. You can only judge people. And I don't think, someone has said earlier on that there's been trials of this. I don't think that's right at all. I think it's against the law to serve alcohol within the view of the pitch.
And there's a kind of class thing in this as well. I think I want to keep away from. But let's get one more call and see if we got a different view. Tony's an Everton fan. Hello, Tony.
Hello, gentlemen. Can I compliment you on your show today? What a breath of fresh air you guys are, and I'm a big fan of your co-host there with you, mate. And I hope he's well with his health as well.
Thank you.
He's looking very well. If that's any, I'm no doctor. Trust me.
Look. With what Simon has just said regarding drink, word for word, 100%, I go with Simon with this. It makes people too volatile and so forth. Can we risk being banned from football again, like many years ago? What happened to us? The people. They lose things. Cans could be thrown in the air. It could all kick off You know, and it's not worth the risk, gentlemen. You know, that's what my personal view is, boys.
I agree.
Yeah, it is a tightrope, because as well as everything else, Simon, there's a part of me that doesn't want the vast majority to be dictated to because of the behaviour of very few. And so,
but it becomes almost like an ideological argument, doesn't it?
Thank you very much indeed, Tony.
Because there is a point of view of people being entrenched in their positions about what they think they're entitled to have, and lots of football fans think they're entitled to lots of things, and I understand it, and sometimes I concur with it, but I don't think it's broken. So we don't really need to fix it, and it's people that are ideologically aligned with the we should have this, irrespective of the cause and effect of it and the consequences. And when something happens, they'll be the first person that you don't hear from.
I mean, we could easily end up, and there's nothing wrong with this, of course, where if you can drink and watch the women's game, but not in the Premier League. That looks like where we're heading.
Yeah, I mean, also, if you look at the component makeup of the women's games supporters, it's families. So you might actually have a natural curbing element anyway, because people are bringing their children there. Yeah. That's the beautiful side of the women's game, alongside some of the performances on the field. I have to admit, I'm not a great fan of women's football, but I can see its development and its evolution. But the actual component parts of the fans, when you see the atmosphere, it's like when I went to America and I watched Inter Miami play St. Louis, it was like going to a garden party, because everyone is so pleasant to one another. And it's more of an event than actually a sporting contest, it would appear.
And of course, you can hear the rugby fans, say, we all mix on the terrace and we all drink.
But different animals.
Different worlds.
Totally different animals.
Yeah, I mean, look, the libertarian in me wants everyone to be able to do what they want, where they want and when they want. But also the part of me that watched the carnage, and there's no other word in English football in the 80s to which alcohol was a significant contributor, means that I'm on the fence here. I take some convincing that we can all behave. I hope, because the world's changed. CCTV, seated, everyone knows which seat people are in, all the rest of it. It's all changed. I totally get that. There's just a part of me that's slightly resistant to it, though that has not been the majority view of people coming on the show today here on talkSPORT, a show that is now, sadly for me, but no doubt a relief for the rest of you, coming to its natural end. But we shan't go without getting the latest update from the cricket at Old Trafford, where I'm delighted by the proceedings. Sam Ellard.
Yep, been another really good morning session for England, who started at 225 for 2 and an over before lunch. They're at 327 for 2. Joe Root's gone to a 67th Test match 50. This one coming off 106 balls. He's now on 59. Pope's on 69. Washington Sundar took 4 for 22 the last time India bowled at England. We've seen a bit of turn already. Remarkably, it took Shubman Gill 68 overs to bring Sundar into the attack, and when he did, he nearly got the wicket of Root, charging down the wicket, trying to hit the ball over Sundar's head. Didn't get all of it. Washington Sundar nearly took a call and a return, but other than that, it's been tough going for India this morning. They've been well below their best. There was a run-out opportunity, and Ollie Pope did edge behind from Cambodge to the keeper standing up, which wasn't taken. But other than that, England have piled on the runs and are in an incredibly strong position heading to lunch. Pope's got 69, Root's got 60. England 328 for 2 and trailing now on the eve of lunch by just 30 runs.
Listen, thank you very much indeed, Sam. More from Sam throughout the afternoon here on talkSPORT, where, of course, we've come to an end now. I want to thank you all for listening over the last couple of days, generally listening to the station, but particularly over the last couple of days, myself and Simon have been doing our thing. I want to thank you, Simon.
Pleasure, mate. Only you can get me in on a Friday.
Absolutely, and your contribution. And all I will say, Simon, to end the show, is that when people here continue to slag you behind your back, I will continue to stick up for you.
Thank you, mate.
Bless you all. Good afternoon.